Chapter 1569. Fortunately, Lu Yuan was not confused by the words of the ace of the Far East and the deputy consul of the Soviet Consulate General. He went straight to the point and asked, "May I ask why Mr. Peter thinks that Nianji's enemy isn't just the one on the surface? You just met our Nianji. Do you know that much about her situation?" However, the ace of the Far East did this kind of work. If he claimed to be second in terms of seeing the big picture, no one would claim to be first. He was best at finding the truth in clues. President Lu, this logic is very simple. From the analysis of the information I heard yesterday, the person who could carry out those experiments couldn't have been just one person. It had to be a team. But other than the person on the surface, do you know of anyone else? If not, then it must have been well covered up. The ace of the Far East's analysis was well organized. Although I didn't hear much information just from this alone, I can tell that there is someone behind that person. So, if you cooperate with me, you can deal with those people hiding behind the scenes more efficiently. Lu Yuan listened quietly with his hands in his trouser pockets. He looked at the other party's raised hands alienatedly and said calmly, "Mr. Peter, if you had said this before the bug was installed, I might have believed you. In the end, you only said it after we found out about your bug. Do you think we would still believe you?" The ace of the Far East raised his hand and flipped it left and right. His voice was cold and his expression calm. "If you want to think that way, I can't help it. But you should also know that I don't have to take the initiative to make this request. After all, the moment you found out about the bug, I knew. I had plenty of time to stay out of it. Even if I didn't admit it, you guys couldn't do anything to me." This was indeed the truth, and they were only guessing that it was him. However, there was no name engraved on the bug, and the KGB didn't have a special bug. If he really denied it, they had no evidence to accuse him. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, Gu Nianji and the others weren't Auntie May, the British Prime Minister. They couldn't just say, "If I say you did it, then you did it, even if you didn't." Then they could brazenly expel the Soviet diplomats. They didn't have the ability to do that. In a lawsuit in the Wuxia Empire, they had to rely on evidence. Lu Yuan looked at him thoughtfully. The ace of the Far East, Peter, paused for a moment. He turned around and looked at Gu Nianji, who was lying on the hospital bed with a dumbfounded expression. He said calmly, "But I'm still here. I took the initiative to come to you and ask for your forgiveness. I really didn't mean anything by it. Miss Gu's life is so pitiful, or rather, I've never thought that there would still be people who have experienced such terrible pain in modern society. My heart aches." Gu Nianji's face was cold and she was speechless at his words. Was she that pitiful? Why didn't he know? "Miss Gu saved my life, of course I have to repay her kindness. Originally, I wanted to secretly help her deal with those who still harbor ill intentions towards her, but since you've discovered it, I won't hide it anymore." He put down his arms and took out the things on his body. There were pistols disguised as pens, small signal transmitters hidden in the soles of shoes, button bombs on coats, and even GPS devices buried under the skin at the back of the neck. These are all the KGB's regular equipment. I've told you everything. Do you have any more questions? Lu Yuan lowered his eyes and thought about the matter carefully. What Peter said did make sense. The truth was that this KGB member already knew part of the truth. Unless they could kill him without anyone noticing, it was better not to fall out with him. Besides, with this KGB member's identity, could they really kill him without anyone noticing? Now that things had come to this, the only way out seemed to be to cooperate with him. Of course, there was no need to talk about being a private nurse. Lu Yuan thought about it and looked at Gu Nianji, who was sitting on the hospital bed. Gu Nianji glanced at him and turned her gaze to the ace of the Far East, Peter Huashaoheng, who was standing in front of her bed. The first time she saw him, she was really stunned and couldn't control herself at all. But now that she saw him again, she felt her heart was as still as water, and there were no ripples. Very good, this proved that she wasn't a complete beauty lover. Although this person had the same face as Major General Hua over there, and was even more exquisite and beautiful, she wasn't tempted at all. Her little heart was still recovering weakly, and she couldn't withstand such ups and downs. Gu Nianji subconsciously covered her chest, and her face darkened as she said coldly, "You want to be my private nurse?" The ace of the Far East nodded. "Yes." Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. "Just because you want to do it, I'll let you do it? If you're so capable, why don't you go to heaven?" Lu Jin, who was hiding in the secret room, was overjoyed when he heard this. He couldn't help nodding. "That's right, if you're so capable, why don't you go to heaven?" He had heard this from Lu Yuan so often that his ears were almost calloused. Today, when he heard it from Gu Nianji, he actually felt that it was indescribably beautiful. He liked to hear his daughter say this to someone else. He couldn't help but push the door open and walk out. That's right, if you're so capable, why don't you go to heaven? The ace of the Far East, Peter, Lu Yuan. Gu Nianji hadn't even finished rolling her eyes when she was choked by her father's unreliable actions. Dad, why did you come out? She couldn't help complaining with an unconscious hint of coquettishness. Lu Jin stopped in his tracks awkwardly. He had one foot in the door and one foot outside. He looked back at the way he had come and said embarrassedly, "Then should I go in again?" Lu Yuan's face was numb. He accepted his fate and said, "You're already out, so why go in? You're the one who caused this. Come out and say something." Anyway, the KGB had already heard all the conversation between Lu Jin and Gu Nianji yesterday. No matter how much Lu Jin hid, he would only be deceiving himself. Seeing Lu Jin come out, the ace of the Far East wasn't surprised at all. He nodded and greeted him, "Good evening, Uncle Lu." Lu Jin. Lu Yuan, Gu Nianji, don't call me uncle for no reason. Lu Jin walked out impatiently and closed the door behind him. His attitude was so natural that it was as if he hadn't walked out of the secret room, but from next door. He was very big-hearted. The ace of the Far East smiled and didn't argue with him. Lu Jin walked over and looked him up and down. He snorted. "You're not bad-looking, but your heart is too bad. Do you think you can protect my daughter with your abilities?" The ace of the Far East, Peter, became cautious and said solemnly, "Then, Uncle Lu, do you think you've protected your daughter?" Blood was spilled. Lu Jin was dead. Gu Nianji saw that the ace of the Far East's combat power was too strong. With just one sentence, he had shut her arrogant genius father up. She quickly raised her head and said, "Xiao Lu, Dad, can you guys go out for a while? I want to have a word with this KGB man in private." She couldn't let this man lead them into the ditch. Gu Nianji finally realized that this ace of the Far East was indeed an ace. Just his glib tongue alone was amazing. She didn't know how many more abilities he had hidden. Thinking about it, wouldn't it be better to have one more friend than one more enemy? After all, when she was there, she had become good friends with the second-in-command of the KGB, Vladimir, and his driver, Uncle Ivan. Gu Nianji pondered to herself and gestured for Lu Yuan and Lu Jin to go out first. Lu Jin was still a little reluctant, but Lu Yuan could tell that Gu Nianji was also a person with ideas. At least, she was more reliable than her father, so he pulled Lu Jin out. The door quietly closed, leaving only Gu Nianji and the ace of the Far East in the room. Gu Nianji raised her hand to rub her swollen temples, but her stamina couldn't keep up. She couldn't even lift her arms. She let out a sigh and lowered her hand that was half raised. However, the ace of the Far East saw it. He naturally walked over and sat by her bed. He reached out his hands and gently massaged her temples. His hands were soft and gentle, and the massage was just right. Gu Nianji's headache was instantly relieved. She closed her eyes and felt her scalp go numb. It was extremely comfortable. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." The ace of the Far East's voice lingered in her ears, like the whispers of lovers in autumn. Gu Nianji came to her senses and tilted her head slightly. "Thank you, I'm much better." The ace of the Far East moved his hand away and felt the delicate softness of her skin on the pads of his fingers. He couldn't help rubbing his fingers and reminiscing the feeling of her. "Don't think so badly of me. I'm not that heartless. You saved me, and that's enough for me to go through fire and water for you." Perhaps it was because they were the only two in the room, but the ace of the Far East spoke passionately. Gu Nianji wasn't used to it. She glanced at him sideways and said, "I didn't save you for you. I hope you understand. Under those circumstances, even if it was someone else, I would have saved them." The ace of the Far East smiled. "That's even rarer. Where can I find such a good girl? I haven't even treated her well, but she's willing to take the bullet for me. If I don't take the initiative, I won't be able to get a wife in my life." "Stop, stop." Gu Nianji quickly made a pause gesture with her hand. "Mr. Peter, if you want to repay me, I won't stop you, but don't say such mushy words. I'll think you're teasing me." "Teasing?" The ace of the Far East seemed to be hurt. "I'm sincerely expressing my love. Of course, it's up to you whether you accept it or not. I won't force you." "I won't accept it." Gu Nianji rejected him without hesitation. "As long as you don't say such mushy words, we can still be good friends, ordinary friends." The ace of the Far East's eyes flashed. He hadn't thought that this girl would accept him in one night. If he could really settle it in one night, he would look down on his own judgment. "Okay, then let's start as ordinary friends." The ace of the Far East picked up the bowl of porridge that Gu Nianji hadn't finished and scooped a spoonful of porridge for her. "Open your mouth." Gu Nianji subconsciously opened her mouth and was fed a mouthful of chicken porridge by the ace of the Far East. Lu Yuan and Lu Jin, who were waiting outside, looked at the time. About 10 minutes had passed, but there was no sound from inside. The two of them were a little worried, so they gently pushed the door open and looked through the crack. In the end, they saw Mr. Peter sitting by Gu Nianji's bed, where Lu Jin had just been sitting. He was holding a bowl of porridge and a small spoon, feeding Gu Nianji. One mouthful after another, he was quite skilled at feeding her. Lu Jin didn't feel good. Lu Yuan also felt that something was wrong. The two of them looked at each other quietly for a while, but still knocked on the door. "Are you guys done? We haven't eaten yet." Gu Nianji, the ace of the Far East, looked relaxed. He turned around and said, "Please come in, both of you." Lu Jin walked in with a scowl on his face. He came to Gu Nianji's bedside and said to Peter, "Get up. You're the guest. How can I let you do such a thing? I'm proving to you that I can be Miss Gu's personal caregiver." The ace of the Far East put down the porridge bowl and spoon and stood up gracefully. "I've been trained to care for gunshot wounds, and I can also do infant care." Gu Nianji looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Unfortunately, she couldn't raise her arm, so she couldn't even cover her face. Lu Jin sat back in his seat irritably. He picked up the porridge bowl and continued to feed Gu Nianji. He said with a straight face, "Is professional training to care for gunshot wounds that great? I'll go teach myself right away, and I'll become an expert in this field tomorrow. As for infant care, I've been an expert in this field for 20 years. "Really? Uncle Lu also knows about infant care?" "Of course. I'm familiar with the growth indicators of babies at various stages, the various nutrients in formula milk, and the texture and function of different diapers." Lu Jin talked non-stop as he fed Gu Nianji porridge. "That's great, but Uncle Lu is familiar with formula milk and diapers from 20 years ago, right? I've paid attention to the latest formula milk and diapers." The ace of the Far East could really talk about any topic, and he was going all out. Infant care? Why were they fighting over this? Gu Nianji felt that the topic was going in a strange direction, so she quickly said, "Dad, President Lu, I think it's good that Mr. Peter wants to help, but I don't need him to be my personal caregiver. That's too much of a waste." As soon as she said this, Lu Yuan understood what she meant. He nodded approvingly and said, "That's what I think too. Since Mr. Peter wants to help us, that's exactly what we want. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy." Gu Nianji was exactly what he wanted. She quickly nodded and said, "Yes, that's right. So why don't Mr. Peter work with President Lu and see if he can improve the security on our side? Also, yes. We're good at network security, but Mr. Peter is from the KGB. He should have more experience with personal safety protection, right?" Lu Yuan instantly understood what Gu Nianji meant and echoed her, intending to isolate Peter from Gu Nianji. The ace of the Far East understood and said coldly, "That's no problem. I'll make the arrangements right away. Don't worry, no one has been able to break through the KGB's security line and get close to the important people we need to protect." Actually, he had taken the initiative to come here today to reassure them. He really hadn't expected this person to be so capable. He had found out about the bug he had installed so quickly. He had no intention of going against them, so he chose to confess immediately. No matter what, Gu Nianji was his savior, and he wouldn't let anyone continue to hurt her. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief. That was the only way. She would take it one step at a time. She just wanted to recover as soon as possible. Her current weak state was too uncomfortable. She couldn't even lift her arms. If someone really came in at this time to take her life, she would only be left with a dead end. She would rather die in order to get rid of the He family's shackles. Now that the He family had let go, of course she didn't want to die. Who would want to die if they could live well? Lu Yuan saw that Peter had agreed and patted him on the shoulder. "Okay, let's go to the study and have a detailed talk." The ace of the Far East turned to look at Gu Nianji. There was a trace of reluctance on his cold face. Lu Jin turned to glare at him. "Let's go. Let's have a good talk. My daughter's safety is in your hands." Lu Yuan brought the ace of the Far East out of the guest room on the first floor where Gu Nianji was staying and brought him to the study on the other side. It was a small study with a crystal-clear glass wall that faced the refreshing lake view. "Sit." Lu Yuan sat down on the sofa in the study and pointed at the seat opposite him for the ace of the Far East to sit down. The ace of the Far East sat down unceremoniously. He stretched his long legs and crossed his arms. He said calmly, "Do you have anything else to say? Do you smoke?" Lu Yuan picked up a pack of cigarettes, took out one, lit it, and took a puff. The ace of the Far East shook his head. No. Okay. Lu Yuan held a cigarette in one hand as he looked at the ace of the Far East's appearance. He narrowed his eyes and said, "You're from the Soviet Union? You grew up in the Soviet Union?" "I was born in the Soviet Union and grew up in the Soviet Union." The ace of the Far East also looked at Lu Yuan in front of him. "But President Lu, where were you born? Where did you grow up?" "Me?" Lu Yuan laughed. "I was born in the Wuxia Empire and grew up in the Wuxia Empire." "What's wrong? Do you have any questions?" "I do have some questions." The ace of the Far East looked at the beard on Lu Yuan's face. "Your disguise is very simple. Who are you guarding against?" This kind of disguise couldn't even be hidden from Lu Jin, and of course, it couldn't be hidden from the ace spy who had a keen eye. "Yes, I'm just guarding against someone following me at night and finding Nianji through me." Lu Yuan didn't hide anything and told him about Nianji's mother, Qin Yaoguang, asking him questions. His fingers brushed the ash off the ashtray and Lu Yuan said calmly, "Since you know about Nianji's background, you also know that her mother isn't a kind person." "I've never seen such a vicious biological mother," the ace of the Far East said without hesitation. "I've seen a lot of things. I've seen many parents who are vicious to their own children, but none of them can compare to Qin Yaoguang. Even if you don't tell me, I'll still settle the score with her." "I advise you not to interfere in the matter between Qin Yaoguang and Nianji," Lu Yuan reminded him. "She should be left to do it herself. The most important thing for you right now should be to help protect Nianji. Before she recovers from her injuries, she can't be disturbed." The ace of the Far East nodded. "Don't worry about that. I'll give you a plan right away. Just find someone to set it up according to the plan." Of course, he wouldn't use the KGB's resources to protect Gu Nianji. Other than him, he wouldn't let anyone from the KGB know about Gu Nianji's background. Lu Yuan smiled. The lines at the corners of his eyes were clear and deep. The ace of the Far East, who had been looking at him, asked tentatively, "President Lu, with all due respect, have you really never been to the Soviet Union? You look quite similar to my uncle who died in the Soviet Union more than 20 years ago." This was today's 5,000-word chapter, Chapter 1558, Hitting the Nail on the Head. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. There are no more at night. I'll update when the monthly votes reach 3,000. Moi. Chapter 1570. Really? Lu Yuan looked very surprised. "Do I really look like your uncle who died in the Soviet Union more than 20 years ago? How old was your uncle when he died? Do you have a photo of him?" The ace of the Far East. "My uncle was probably in his early 30s when he died. If he hadn't died early, he would have been a good hand in our KGB," the ace of the Far East said regretfully. "I don't have a photo of him with me, but if you want to see it, I'll call my family in the Soviet Union and ask them to scan it and send it over." "That's a pity. He died young. The heavens are jealous of the talented, the heavens are jealous of the talented." Lu Yuan patted his knee with one hand and looked up with a sigh. He was extremely regretful. The ace of the Far East nodded slightly. "Yes, it's true that the heavens are jealous of the talented. So when I saw you, I was really shocked. I thought I recognized the wrong person. How could a person who had clearly passed away more than 20 years ago appear alive and well again? So I really did recognize the wrong person." "Hee, after more than 20 years, you can still clearly remember your uncle's appearance. Your memory is amazing." Lu Yuan stood up calmly. "What do you want to drink? Coffee or tea?" "I'll drink water." The ace of the Far East seemed to be a very self-disciplined person. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, and only drank water. He didn't even touch drinks. "My memory is indeed very good, especially when it comes to recognizing people." Lu Yuan brought him a bottle of mineral water and placed it on the coffee table between them. He held a can of beer and opened the lid with his fingers. He raised his head and took a sip. "That's really rare. No wonder you're in the KGB. President Lu, you flatter me. The KGB is also a serious job. It's better than working in a casino at a young age." The ace of the Far East held the bottle of mineral water and had no intention of drinking it. His attitude turned cold. "A person with a rich family like President Lu won't understand." "Oh? It sounds like you didn't have a good time when you were young?" Lu Yuan put one hand on the armrest of the sofa and held the can of beer in the other. He looked very concerned. "Did your family not care about you?" "My parents divorced early and went their separate ways. I grew up with my grandmother. Then she passed away and I was depressed for a while. It wasn't until I joined the KGB by chance that I had this opportunity." The ace of the Far East stretched his long legs lazily. "Actually, I'm a diplomat now and the KGB will slowly withdraw." "Why?" Is there any difference between your Soviet diplomats and the KGB? Lu Yuan mocked lightly. Of course there's a difference. The ace of the Far East smiled faintly. Before my identity was exposed, I was from the KGB. After my identity is exposed, I'm just a diplomat. I'm also very curious. Logically speaking, how could the KGB be so careless? Lu Yuan tilted his head and looked at him with a smile. Actually, I'm even more curious. The ace of the Far East's gaze sharpened like a searchlight, as if he wanted to illuminate who was under Lu Yuan's skin. Not to mention ordinary people, even the personnel of your country's intelligence agency wouldn't be able to discover the bug I used in such a short period of time. But President Lu could do it. Should I suspect Boss Lu's identity? Or should I be envious of your country's detector? Lu Yuan laughed out loud. You can think whatever you want. But as far as detectors are concerned, I have to brag that all the detectors in the world combined aren't as good as mine. Lu Jin's genius invention had the special effect of turning something rotten into something magical. He could make a small modification to the detectors with ordinary functions sold on the market, and the effect could be magnified geometrically. However, no matter how talented he was still in the field of technology. The sense of confidentiality in his mind was almost negligible. If it weren't for Lu Yuan, who had been by his side to help him check up on his mistakes over the years, he would have been caught by He Qingjian countless times. The ace of the Far East yearned for it and couldn't help but ask, "It's that powerful? I wonder if I have the honor of seeing your magical detector with my own eyes?" President Lu smiled amiably, but he immediately rejected it. "No, you don't have the honor." The ace of the Far East also knew that other people wouldn't take it out easily, but he wouldn't be satisfied if he didn't ask. He shrugged. "It's fine if President Lu doesn't want to. I never force people to do things against their will." He stood up leisurely. "I'll go back and make a security plan. How do I send it to President Lu?" Lu Yuan gave him his email address. "Just send it to this email address." The ace of the Far East wrote down his email address and said coldly, "Then I'll take my leave first. As for Miss Gu, I hope President Lu can put in a good word for me. I sincerely want to pursue her." "You want to pursue our Nianji?" Lu Yuan chuckled. "With all due respect, may I ask how old you are, Mr. Peter? Don't you have a girlfriend?" "I just turned 30 this year." The ace of the Far East's expression was a little unnatural. "I don't have a girlfriend now. My previous girlfriend has already broken up." Lu Yuan's face immediately pulled a long face. "You're already 30 years old and you still don't have a girlfriend. How dare you pursue our Nianji? Our Nianji is only 20 years old. Don't you think you're too old for her?" This stabbed his heart. The ace of the Far East, dead. Lu Yuan didn't let him go. He continued to snort coldly. "Are all you Soviets so rude? You don't care if the girl is already taken or not, yet you want to snatch her away? Miss Gu has a boyfriend?" The ace of the Far East came back to his senses. His eyes narrowed as he glanced in the direction of Gu Nianji's room. She was so seriously injured, but her boyfriend didn't come to see her? How could you agree to let Miss Gu be with such a coward? Lu Yuan's face darkened and he stood up abruptly. Why was she so seriously injured? Don't take advantage of her. The ace of the Far East's face immediately darkened. His cold and handsome face exuded a bone-piercing chill. The pretense of harmony between the two of them was gone. They were about to pull out their guns at each other in the next second. However, both of them were people with strong self-control, so they wouldn't lose control of their emotions. Therefore, the two of them just glared at each other and parted on bad terms. After the ace of the Far East left, Lu Yuan returned to the guest room where Gu Nianji was recuperating. He sat down at the makeshift dining table and picked up his chopsticks to continue eating. He said resentfully, "I'm so angry that I'm full." Lu Jin turned around in surprise and said, "There's someone who can anger you? Who is it? So powerful. I have to go and learn from him." Gu Nianji. Lu Yuan pretended not to hear her and ate in big mouthfuls, as if he wanted to swallow all his true emotions and digest them. He never showed them. Lu Jin fed Gu Nianji the last mouthful of porridge and said with a smile, "Looks like it's that Mr. Peter. He's really powerful. He can go to heaven." Gu Nianji, seeing that Lu Yuan was a little depressed, Gu Nianji quickly tried to smooth things over. "Dad, I still want to drink soup. Can you heat a bowl for me? I like hot soup. It's fresher." Okay. I know how to heat soup." Lu Jin happily went to the kitchen to heat up the soup for her. Gu Nianji took the opportunity to comfort Lu Yuan. "President Lu, was it that Peter who made you angry? Don't be angry. When I recover, I'll help you fight him." I'll make him cry and kowtow to you, pour you tea and admit his mistake. This Peter was too talkative. Gu Nianji felt that if she really wanted to teach him a lesson, she would have to wait until she recovered. Bickering was both mental and physical work. Lu Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked up at Gu Nianji and said, "Okay, I'll wait for him to kowtow to me, pour me tea and admit his mistake." Gu Nianji, I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously. She didn't know if it was because she had comforted him just right, but Lu Yuan's mood gradually improved. I appreciate your kindness. You're weak now, so you have to recuperate well. I'll wait for you to recover and help me fight that Peter, Lu Yuan said half-jokingly. In the future, tell me what you want to eat. I'll cook it for you. Thank you, President Lu. Your cooking is so delicious. Gu Nianji's cooking skills were terrible, so she was full of respect for anyone who could cook. Lu Yuan nodded with a smile. After dinner, he cleaned up the house. He glued his beard back on, put on his hat, and resumed his simple disguise. He left Gu Nianji's neighborhood and went back to his home. The ace of the Far East returned to the Consulate General of the Soviet Union. He didn't sleep all night and came up with a sophisticated security plan. From the public opinion on the outside to the smokescreen to the interrogation of the residents in the entire neighborhood and the building, everything was pervasive and Gu Nianji was tightly protected. Lu Yuan and Lu Jin had money. Money meant manpower and resources, so the ace of the Far East plan was carried out very well. Secretary Lin, who was by Lu Yuan's side, knew where Gu Nianji was, but the problem was that others didn't know that she knew. She was also a tight-lipped person, and in order to keep it a secret, according to the ace of the Far East's plan, Lu Yuan still sent her to a closed base of the Lu Corporation to be in charge of the development of a new product there. In addition, He Jichu was locked in the base and didn't have any contact with the outside world. Qin Yaoguang had no way of starting and had no clues. Gu Nianji seemed to have disappeared from Sea City out of thin air. She couldn't find her whereabouts at all. How could this be? Qin Yaoguang flew into a rage. You can't even find a single person. Our Qin family already has such a high salary for white-collar workers. Qin Yaoguang was about to increase her search price when a video suddenly appeared on the internet. It was a foreigner who was treated at the Qin Corporation's private hospital. He had spent tens of thousands of yuan to treat a simple cold and had no choice but to be transferred to a public hospital. This foreigner cursed the Qin Corporation's private hospital online, claiming that this hospital only knew how to collect money and was a black shop that treated human life as grass. This accusation was a little heavy. In addition, the Qin Corporation's private hospital did consider itself a noble hospital, and its fees were indeed very expensive. However, treating a small cold cost tens of thousands of yuan. Even a noble hospital would not be able to afford it. Therefore, many people who were dissatisfied with the Qin Corporation's private hospital also spoke out. It quickly became a trend and became a hot news topic. This caused a sharp decline in the number of people going to the hospital. The Qin Corporation stock price fell for a week in a row. It was obvious that someone was taking the opportunity to crash the market. Faced with such a serious public image crisis, Qin Yaoguang had no choice but to divert her attention from looking for Gu Nianji. She went all out with the public relations media to save the Qin Corporation's private hospital's image and prestige. She appeared in all the major media outlets every day, held press conferences, and reorganized the entire hospital system. She promised the society that medical ethics are the most important, and medical skills are benevolent. She also took the initiative to lower the various fees. She even sent the best doctors under her banner to the countryside to volunteer for public welfare. She was extremely busy. Gu Nianji swiped her phone and thought to herself, finding something for me to do is indeed a good move. This ace of the Far East really had some skills. Under such a foolproof layer of protection, Gu Nianji safely spent more than a month recuperating. No one disturbed or spied on her. It was just her and Lu Jin living in this penthouse duplex. Her physique was special and she recovered quickly. However, this time the injury was too serious and her internal organs were damaged, so it took her nearly a month to slowly recover. It was almost Christmas. Gu Nianji came out of the gym and wiped the sweat off her forehead with the towel on her shoulder. She saw snowflakes floating outside the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. It's going to snow. Gu Nianji stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and breathed into it. She wrote on the floor-to-ceiling window with her fingers. She had just finished her rehabilitation exercise, so she wasn't thinking about anything. She looked at the snow outside the window, and her fingers moved subconsciously. She was so focused that the doorbell behind her rang. Lu Jin didn't even know when he opened the door to let someone in. The ace of the Far East and Lu Yuan walked in one after another. They saw a tall girl in loose casual sportswear standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. She was raising her hand to write on the window. The ace of the Far East saw Gu Nianji's words clearly, and his eyes lit up. He quickly walked over and said, "You're writing my name. Are you thinking of me? I miss you too." Gu Nianji was stunned. Only then did she see that she had written Hua Xiaoheng on the floor-to-ceiling window. This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1559, When I Miss You. A reminder for everyone's monthly and recommendation tickets. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the extra update for 3,000 monthly votes will be given. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1571. Lu Yuan, who had followed the ace of the Far East in, narrowed his eyes. His gaze lingered on the name Hua Xiaoheng that Gu Nianji had written for a while. When he looked at Deputy Consul Peter again, his gaze was a little cold. Gu Nianji composed herself and reached out to erase the name she had scribbled. Without turning her head, she said, "Yes, you owe me a life. Do you think I miss you? Don't worry. From the moment you took the bullet for me, my life was yours." The ace of the Far East stood beside her and lowered his head slightly. His dark eyes were unfathomable, but his tone was so affectionate that Gu Nianji's ears turned red. This guy's ability to say sweet nothings was probably at the postdoctoral level. He knew exactly how to speak, how to circulate his qi, and what tone of voice to use to convey his feelings in the most complete manner. He had really practiced it. Gu Nianji wasn't fooled. She was just lamenting that the KGB was really amazing. It was really different to be from a professional background. She turned around and tilted her head to look at the ace of the Far East with a smile. "Mr. Peter, what else do you not know?" "What do you mean?" The ace of the Far East raised an eyebrow. For the first time, he realized that he couldn't keep up with Gu Nianji's pace. "Look, you know how to flirt with girls, gamble, swim, fly a plane, shoot a gun, nurse the wounded, and even call yourself an expert in infant care. Now you can even say sweet nothings. You're so capable, are you not giving others a way out?" Gu Nianji pointed at him with her finger. "But you don't have to show off your abilities in front of me. It's useless. Don't waste your time." The ace of the Far East wasn't discouraged. He smiled faintly. "Thank you for your encouragement. I'll continue to work hard." Gu Nianji, a thick-skinned person, was really scary. A handsome person was even more terrifying when they were thick-skinned. "I'm not praising you." Gu Nianji frowned. "What are you doing here? Didn't I ask you to be my security guard?" Gu Nianji hadn't seen the ace of the Far East for more than a month. She thought he had given up. Just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief, he came knocking on her door again. "I did. It's my credit that no one has bothered you for so long." The ace of the Far East looked at her expression carefully. He saw that her lips were red, her teeth were white, her eyebrows were dark, and her eyes were as pure as autumn water. Other than her face being a little pale, she was basically like a normal person. "What about you? Are you feeling better? Why don't you go lie on the bed?" "Thanks to you, I'm much better." Gu Nianji waved her arm and said calmly, "Okay, you can go now." The ace of the Far East bared his teeth at her. "Seeing that you recovered so quickly, I'll sell you some information." Gu Nianji pouted and turned to leave. "No, I don't have money. I'm used to it." I have a piece of information for you." The ace of the Far East put his hands in his trouser pockets and said behind her, "It's about your mother, Qin Yaoguang." Gu Nianji didn't stop walking. She quickly returned to her guest room and slammed the door shut. The ace of the Far East looked at the tightly shut door in bewilderment and said, "Doesn't she want to teach that unworthy woman a lesson?" "That's none of your business," Lu Yuan said leisurely from behind him. Lu Yuan said leisurely behind him, "All right, we're going to make lunch. Deputy Consul Peter, shouldn't you go back now?" The ace of the Far East turned to look at him in surprise. "Aren't you going to ask me to stay for dinner?" "Why should I ask you to stay for dinner?" Lu Yuan's expression darkened. "I'm already tired enough cooking for 3 people every day. Do I have to cook for 1 more person? If you want to stay, you do it." "I'm sorry, I don't know how to cook." The ace of the Far East spread his hands. "All right, looks like I'm not welcome. I'll be leaving then." He turned around and walked towards the door. When he was about to reach the door, he suddenly turned around and said loudly, "Qin Jining is about to be shot. Miss Gu, I said I would avenge you." Although Gu Nianji had entered her guest room, she was still paying attention to what was happening outside. Gu Nianji immediately heard the ace of the Far East shout. She quickly opened the door and asked in surprise, "Why is Qin Jining being shot?" Then she quickly came back to her senses. Is it because of me? The ace of the Far East shook his head. Of course not. He pointed at himself. It's because of me. He failed his mission. He didn't hit me but someone else. As a special forces soldier, Qin Jining's mistake this time could indeed be sentenced to death. Gu Nianji was stunned for a moment. Qin Jining had shot her. It could be said that she had set him up from the beginning to the end. She didn't want to live anymore and used Qin Jining as a gun against her. In a sense, Qin Jining was really innocent. If he was shot, he would be the victim of her battle with He Qingjian. Gu Nianji thought quickly, but she wasn't sure what she should do. The ace of the Far East said slowly. Actually, He Qingjian didn't have to kill him. But your mother, Qin Yaoguang, insisted that he shot her daughter. She wanted him to pay with his life and had to shoot him. Gu Nianji's eyes widened and her limpid eyes flashed. What? It has something to do with Qin Yaoguang again? The execution is on Christmas Eve. The ace of the Far East looked at his watch. From now on, Mr. Qin Jining can live for 23 hours. The time has already been set. Gu Nianji was even more surprised. Where's young Master He? He's just going to watch Qin Jining get shot. If he really wanted to find someone to take responsibility, the person who should have been shot was his father, He Qingjian. Gu Nianji's face turned red with anger. Young Master He is in a dilemma. The ace of the Far East seemed to have done a lot of work over the past month. He had found out everything. Qin Jining was the one who shot, and you were the one who was injured. Young Master He probably had a problem with Qin Jining. Besides, he can't let his father be shot, can he? Gu Nianji froze. This ace of the Far East was really direct with his words. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and rubbed her temples out of habit. She said coldly, "Thank you for your information. I need to think about it. You can leave first." The ace of the Far East made a helpless gesture. "Okay, since you insist, I'll leave." He added, "I'll spend Christmas Eve with you tomorrow." "I don't celebrate Christmas." Gu Nianji rejected him righteously. "I'm from the Wuxia Empire, but I celebrate these foreign holidays." Actually, she did celebrate it. It was Major General Hua from the other world. The ace of the Far East was obviously surprised. "You don't celebrate Christmas? Is that strange?" Gu Nianji smiled fakely. "Then I can only say that you're too inexperienced. I won't see you out." Gu Nianji almost blasted the ace of the Far East out of the apartment door, but she didn't feel the joy of victory. She returned to her room thoughtfully and sat on the sofa. She hugged a panda pillow and frowned as she thought about what the ace of the Far East had just said. In the kitchen on the other side, Lu Yuan was cooking, but he was a little confused. Lu Jin had been watching him with bright eyes. When Lu Yuan finished making a plate of braised pork and eggplant, Lu Jin said excitedly from the side, "You added salt twice just now. The first time was when you added salt as sugar, and the second time was when you added salt again when you should have added salt." The corners of Lu Yuan's mouth twitched. "Why didn't you say so earlier? I thought you'd invented a new method." Lu Jin was very eager to learn. He held his phone and kept filming him cooking. "In the end, I realized that you were just distracted. What were you thinking about?" Without another word, Lu Yuan threw away the plate of braised pork and eggplant. He took another eggplant and cut it up. He cooked it again in the frying pan. Lu Jin shook his head and looked at the video on his phone. He said, "This video won't work anymore. I'll use the surveillance camera to record it." Lu Yuan said coldly, "Even if you use a 120-frame camera to record it, you still can't learn how to cook." Lu Jin. "Boss, are you in a bad mood today?" Lu Yuan was stunned. Even Lu Jin, a slow person with interpersonal disorder, could see the change in his mood. Lu Yuan quickly retracted his thoughts and focused his attention on the iron pot in front of him. Lu Jin looked at him suspiciously for a while and went to Gu Nianji's room. He said in confusion, "Did Deputy Consul Peter make Boss Lu angry just now?" Gu Nianji came back to her senses and shook her head subconsciously. "No. Deputy Consul Peter was selling me information. He didn't talk to President Lu." "Huh. Then why is Boss Lu so dejected?" Lu Jin sat on the sofa next to Gu Nianji and shook his head. "Forget it. Boss Lu's heart is deeper than the sea. I won't try to figure him out. It's better to talk to my daughter. It's better for your physical and mental health." Gu Nianji, she didn't know she had this ability, but since Lu Jin was here she analyzed it with him. After all, Lu Jin knew Qin Yaoguang better. "Dad, Deputy Consul Peter told me something just now. He said that Qin Yaoguang asked to shoot Qin Jining because of me." Lu Jin immediately said, "She wanted to force you to show up." Gu Nianji, it was exactly what she was thinking. Qin Yaoguang wanted Qin Jining to pay with his life to avenge her. Forcing her to show up was a lie. Even if you don't show up, Qin Jining will die. Qin Yaoguang won't have any regrets. Lu Jin added, in a sense she's very stubborn and doesn't have much sympathy. Yes, how can an earthworm with its intestines all the way to the bottom have any sympathy? Gu Nianji said resentfully. But Qin Jining is a little stupid, but he's really nice to me. As she spoke, she told him about how Qin Jining had saved her life on the Caribbean Sea Snake Island when she first came here. Lu Jin didn't think much of it. He's the accomplice. Do you think he really wanted to save you? He was just carrying out the mission he Qingjian gave him. Just like this time he used you as bait to shoot. He deserved it. However, Gu Nianji still couldn't watch as Qin Yaoguang used him as a raft and shot him in the name of avenging her. At the same time in Qin Yaoguang's villa, when Shuyi was discussing with her. Auntie Qin, will Gu Nianji be alive? It's been 2 weeks since the news that Qin Jining was going to be shot spread, but she hasn't come to plead for him. Gu Nianji is actually quite a saintly person. She wouldn't let go of such an opportunity to show off her noble character, but she hasn't appeared yet. Could it be that she's in trouble? Qin Yaoguang closed her eyes and sighed. You should be dead. What a pity, what a good experimental material. Auntie Qin, don't be anxious. I think this matter still falls on young Master He. When Shuyi quietly suggested to Qin Yaoguang, why don't we ask Qin Jining's biological brother, Qin Ziyuan, to come back? His brother is about to be executed. When he comes back he will definitely plead with young Master He. He Jichu had no choice but to leave the base. As long as He Jichu came out, they could find a way to get the whereabouts of Gu Nianji's body from him. This is today's first installment of the monthly ticket, 3,000 plus updates delivered. Chapter 1560, Being a Professional Makes a Difference. Let me remind you of your monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1572. Qin Ziyuan? His relationship with young Master He is stronger than Qin Jining's. Qin Yaoguang's heart skipped a beat. I think we can try. When Shuyi received Qin Yaoguang's permission and immediately found someone to inform Qin Jining's brother, Qin Ziyuan. Qin Jining's matter was actually a secret in the military. It wasn't a case that could be publicly tried and executed. From the mission he accepted to the method he used to carry out the mission and the final outcome of the mission, none of it could be publicly revealed to the public. Even his family probably wouldn't know about this. In the end, they would only receive news that he had died during the mission because he had made some kind of mistake. If there was no mistake, he would receive the title of martyr. His family would also receive the treatment of a martyr's family and receive a generous pension. But if he made a mistake, the family wouldn't get anything. This was a tacit understanding. However, Qin Jining's identity was rather special. He was the son of He Qingjian's wife, Qin Suwen's brother. He was He Jichu's cousin and had been close since they were young. Therefore, when Shuyi took advantage of this loophole and deliberately leaked it to someone who was familiar with Qin Jining, that person was indeed frightened and immediately went to inform Qin Jining's brother, Qin Ziyuan. Qin Ziyuan was shocked when he received the call and immediately called He Jichu. Young Master He, what's going on? Why was my brother, Qin Jining, asked to be shot? What happened? Qin Ziyuan asked anxiously over the phone. He Jichu had been staying at the Sea City West City base for more than a month. He had a large number of troops and was closely monitoring the apartment complex where Gu Nianji lived. He had been the most wary of Qin Yaoguang, but Qin Yaoguang was quickly distracted by the incident at the Qin Corporation's private hospital. She couldn't interfere anymore, so it relieved him a lot of pressure. He Jichu didn't respond for a long time after receiving Qin Ziyuan's call. Qin Ziyuan's heart kept sinking. Young Master He, say something? Are you serious? Did my brother really do something wrong? He's always been loyal to uncle. How could this happen? He Jichu thought of Gu Nianji, who had stopped breathing in his arms that night, and his heart ached. He closed his eyes and said coldly, if you do something wrong you have to be punished. He's a soldier and his standards are different from ordinary people. Qin Ziyuan's eyes reddened. My brother doesn't even have a girlfriend. He's not married and he doesn't have children. Cousin, I'm sorry for your loss. Jichu hung up. His expression was indifferent to the extreme, and his shimmering peach blossom eyes were silent. However, Qin Ziyuan didn't want to give up just like that. After thinking about it, he took a car to the He family overnight and asked to see He Qingjian. Uncle-in-law, I just want to ask, is my younger brother's mistake really unforgivable? Qin Ziyuan was worried the entire way and his face was very haggard. He looked at He Qingjin as if he was asking for help and was in extreme despair. I just want to know, what else can I do to save my brother's life? As long as we don't shoot him, we can let him stay in jail for the rest of his life. He Qingjin raised his head from behind his desk, took off the reading glasses on the bridge of his nose, and rubbed the glabella acupoint between his eyebrows. He also said regretfully, this matter was actually a misunderstanding, but it resulted in an irreversible outcome. Now, it's the victim's family that's complaining and asking for him to be shot. I can't do anything about it. Victim. Qin Ziyuan's legs went weak, and he almost knelt down to He Qingjin. He killed someone? Didn't you say he was on a mission? I can't tell you what mission he was on. He Qingjin sighed and shook his head. But I can tell you that he made a big mistake on a mission and accidentally killed an innocent person. This person's family won't let him go. Qin Ziyuan's hands and feet were cold. He stared blankly at He Qingjin for a while and his voice changed. Then can you let me see the family? I can make compensation no matter what kind of compensation it is. According to their law, even in a murder case, if the family understood and made compensation, the murderer could not be sentenced to death. Moreover, Qin Jining didn't murder on purpose, but accidentally killed during a mission. He Qingjin said regretfully, unfortunately, the family won't accept financial compensation because she doesn't lack money. But maybe she needs compensation in other ways? As long as she mentions it, I can think of a way. Qin Ziyuan wiped away his tears. I only have this one brother. My parents died when I was young. It was my aunt who found us and raised us. I can't watch my brother lose his life because of a mistake. He Qingjin's wife, Qin Suwen, was Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining's aunt. He Qingjin's heart immediately softened when he heard Qin Ziyuan mention his wife. He nodded. Okay, then go find Qin Yaoguang. If she doesn't pursue the matter, your brother won't have to be shot. You still know Qin Yaoguang, right? Qin Ziyuan was stunned. Qin Yaoguang? Your stepwife, Qin Yaoguang? What does this have to do with her? Because the person your brother accidentally killed was her daughter, Gu Nianji. He Qingjin lowered his head and said expressionlessly, Qin Yaoguang wants to avenge her daughter and your brother to pay with his life. Qin Ziyuan's heart sank. Gu Nianji? Hasn't she been missing for many years? Yes, she just found her recently, so Qin Yaoguang is very angry. Do you understand? To you it's a brother. To her it's a daughter. He Qingjin folded his hands on the desk and looked up at Qin Ziyuan. Do you still want to try? Try. Qin Ziyuan gritted his teeth. He wouldn't be satisfied if he didn't try at least once. Early the next morning it was already Christmas Eve. Qin Ziyuan came to the Qin family's private hospital and asked to see Qin Yaoguang. Qin Yaoguang was waiting for him. When she heard that he was asking to see her, she immediately asked someone to bring him in. Din Qin. Qin Ziyuan used to call her Auntie Qin, but ever since Qin Yaoguang moved out of the He family's mansion, Qin Ziyuan only called her Din Qin. Ziyuan, why are you looking for me? Qin Yaoguang was wearing a white coat and had just come out of the laboratory. She said straightforwardly, I still have something to do. I only have 5 minutes. Make it short. Qin Ziyuan quickly said, sorry to disturb you. I want to ask about my brother, Qin Jining. I'm very sorry for the pain and trouble he caused you. You're here to plead for your brother? Qin Yaoguang's expression darkened. A life for a life. What reason do you have to plead for a murderer? But Qin Ziyuan's lips parted. He didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. I know you've suffered an immeasurable loss and I know you don't lack money, but I still hope to be able to compensate you. As long as I can do it, I'll do my best. However, Qin Yaoguang still objected and refused to relent. Qin Ziyuan begged until he knelt down, but her face was still cold and furious. She even planned to flick her sleeves and leave. At this moment, when Shuyi pushed the door open and came in. When she saw Qin Ziyuan kneeling on the ground, she quickly went forward to help him up and said in surprise, Brother Xiaoyuan, what are you doing? Qin Ziyuan choked with sobs as he pulled her arm. Shuyi, can you help me persuade Din Qin? Jining has a soft spot for you. He's in prison now. Can you help him? What happened to brother little Ning? When Shuyi looked confused, she turned to look at Qin Yaoguang. Auntie Qin, what's going on? Qin Yaoguang turned her head away uncomfortably and said coldly, Shuyi, this has nothing to do with you. Don't worry about it. Qin Ziyuan was slightly stunned. Shuyi, you don't know? What don't I know? When Shuyi was anxious, and the expression on her face was sincere. Auntie Qin, what are you talking about? What happened to brother little Ning? I didn't want Shuyi to know, but Qin Jining killed my daughter and I couldn't even find her body. I really can't take this lying down. Qin Jining must pay for my daughter's death. Qin Yaoguang spoke with certainty and refused to relent. When Shuyi's eyes widened in surprise, as if it was the first time she had heard this news. What? Brother little Ning killed Nianji by mistake. Brother little Ning is going to be shot. But he killed by mistake. I'm a lawyer, I know that manslaughter doesn't require the death penalty. I don't care. My daughter doesn't even have a corpse left. If I don't make Qin Jining pay with his life, I won't be able to rest in peace. Qin Yaoguang pretended to be very angry and glared at Wen Shuyi. Wen Shuyi stood in front of Qin Ziyuan and argued with Qin Yaoguang. Auntie Qin, don't be agitated. Can we discuss this matter again? Let's not talk about you for Nianji's sake. Can you give brother little Ning a chance for my sake? Although Qin Ziyuan felt bad, he was also very touched to see Wen Shuyi go against Qin Yaoguang for Qin Jining. He originally didn't think much of Wen Shuyi and didn't think highly of his brother's feelings for her. He didn't expect Wen Shuyi to stand up for him at the last minute. Qin Ziyuan's impression of her changed greatly when he suddenly encountered Wen Shuyi's enthusiasm and help after asking for help everywhere. Wen Shuyi saw that the time was right, so she gave Qin Yaoguang a look. Qin Yaoguang understood and walked into the small resting room inside. She slammed the door shut. Wen Shuyi turned around and said to Qin Ziyuan, "Brother little Yuan, don't worry. I'll go persuade Auntie Qin again. Auntie Qin is hot-tempered and straightforward, but she's actually quite soft-hearted." She knew that something had happened to Nianji, so she was anxious. You know, Nianji has been missing for several years. It wasn't easy for young Master He to find her. It's reasonable for her to be nervous. Although Qin Ziyuan didn't know about the existence of a parallel space, he knew that He Jichu had gone out to look for Gu Nianji in the past few years. He quickly nodded. "Thank you, Shui. I'll wait for your news." When Shui sent Qin Ziyuan off and went to the resting room to chat with Qin Yaoguang for a while. The two of them had already agreed to wait for Qin Ziyuan to come. I really didn't expect young Master He to be so ruthless. For that damn girl, he could even give up on his cousin who grew up with him. Qin Yaoguang was both amused and emotional. The men of the He family are all like this. When Shuyi's forehead twitched when she heard this. She suppressed the discomfort in her heart and said gently, "Auntie Qin, young Master He was handling things impartially. If Qin Jining hadn't taken the blame, would he have gone against his father?" Haha. Qin Yaoguang pursed her lips and said snappily, "It's actually very simple. As long as he hands over Nianji's body, I won't pursue Qin Jining's fault." When Shuyi nodded. "I'll go tell Qin Ziyuan now. He'll definitely ask young Master He for help." Yes, a dead person can be exchanged for Qin Jining's life. With Qin Ziyuan's plea, young Master He probably won't refuse. Qin Yaoguang calmly analyzed and turned on the computer. "I also have to prepare a secret laboratory immediately. After this, I won't be out for a long time to care about anything else." Huh. "Auntie Qin, how can you not come out?" When Shuyi looked at Qin Yaoguang in shock. "You're the director of such a big hospital." Qin Yaoguang turned to look at her and touched her round face. She smiled and said, "It's fine. I plan to make you the executive vice director of the Qin family's private hospital. When I'm not around, you'll have full authority to take my position." Huh. Really? When Shuyi was surprised and delighted. "Auntie Qin has nurtured me so much. I really won't be able to repay your kindness even if I die." Qin Yaoguang could be said to be the real benefactor in Wen Shuyi's life. Qin Yaoguang was very happy to see her so happy. She tapped her forehead with her finger. "Silly child, you're so capable and a lawyer. It's a waste of your talent to let you manage the hospital. Actually, you should go to the Senate and be the speaker. Auntie Qin, you think too highly of me." When Shuyi stuck out her tongue. In front of Qin Yaoguang, she was as likable as a cute little girl. "I believe in my own judgment." Qin Yaoguang was very excited. When she thought about how she was about to get Gu Nianji's body for her experiment that had been interrupted for more than 10 years, her heart surged. It had been more than 10 years since she had published a top-notch academic article on biological genetics. More than 20 years ago, our Gu Qin laboratory published dozens of important academic articles almost every year. Cells, Science, and Nature practically begged our laboratory to publish them. Qin Yaoguang recalled the grand occasion of the past. Her face was flushed and she looked several years younger. That impressive? Wen Shuyi hadn't been born at that time, so she didn't know anything about that grand occasion. However, she also said yearningly, "That's a pity. If Nianji hadn't died, wouldn't you have been able to do more experiments?" "You can't say that." Qin Yaoguang chuckled and said mockingly, "If she hadn't died, how could I have used her as an experiment again? Wouldn't young master he eat me raw?" Wen Shuyi was stumped for a moment. She felt uncomfortable, but she didn't continue the topic. "Then let's do it this way. I'll go find Qin Ziyuan and ask him to ask young master he for Gun Yanji's body. Okay, just say that I just want to give her a funeral." Qin Yaoguang began to draft the equipment, drugs and manpower needed for the newly established laboratory. When Shuyi came to Qin Ziyuan's house and relayed Qin Yaoguang's request, she said regretfully, "Brother Little Yuan, I can only help you and Brother Little Ning up to here." I persuaded Auntie Qin for a long time before she reluctantly agreed. As long as Nianji's body was given to her and she held a funeral for her, she wouldn't pursue Brother Little Ning's responsibility anymore. Huh? Really? Dean Qin really only wants Nianji's body? Qin Ziyuan didn't expect Qin Yaoguang to only have such a request. He couldn't help but have a much better impression of her. He could even empathize with her pain and difficulty as a mother. "It's all my brother's fault. It's all my brother's fault. I'll help her find Nianji's body right now." "Okay, you can go to the prison and ask Brother Little Ning where Nianji's body is." Of course, Qin Ziyuan immediately asked He Chengjian for help. He wanted to visit Qin Jining in the military prison. At the same time, he said that Qin Yaoguang had already softened. As long as Gun Yanji's body was given to her for a funeral, she wouldn't pursue the matter any further. He Chengjian was stunned for a moment and his eyes narrowed. She really asked for that? Yes, Shuyi helped Little Ning plead. Qin Ziyuan had already planned to agree to Qin Jining's marriage to Wen Shuyi when he was released. He Chengjian's expression turned cold. "Go. It's good to see Qin Jining." Qin Ziyuan didn't care about He Chengjian's expression at all. He packed his things and rushed to the military prison to see Qin Jining. When Qin Jining heard that he wouldn't have to be shot, he let out a long sigh and leaned back in his chair. He smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know where Nianji's body is, but I know that young master he took her away in the end." Qin Ziyuan's heart sank when he thought of He Jichu's attitude. However, at this point, even if he had to kowtow to He Jichu, he had to beg him. Gun Yanji was already dead. Was he going to watch Qin Jining die? He didn't mean to kill her. It was just an accident. Therefore, after going around in circles, Qin Ziyuan arrived at He Jichu's official residence in the afternoon. "Young master Dean Qin has already agreed. As long as we give her Nianji's body, she won't pursue Jining's responsibility." Qin Ziyuan looked at He Jichu hopefully. "Young master I know this is Jining's fault. If you want to hit or scold him, you can hit or scold him when he comes out. But he doesn't deserve to die. Even if he's not my brother, I still think so." Of course, He Jichu knew that Qin Jining didn't deserve to die. Moreover, Qin Yaoguang was the one who had requested for Qin Jining to be shot. He Jichu just hadn't interfered. However, when he heard that Qin Yaoguang's request was for them to hand over Gun Yanji's body, He Jichu curled his lips and revealed a mocking smile. Is this her so-called maternal love? How cheap. As long as they hand over the body, they can spare the life of the person who killed her daughter. Ah. I don't care if you believe it or not, I don't believe it. Qin Ziyuan. He also felt that this request was too easy, but even if he didn't believe it, he had to believe it, because his only goal was to save his brother from the fate of being shot. "Young master I'm begging you." Qin Ziyuan had no choice. Finally, his knees went weak and he knelt down to He Jichu. He lay at He Jichu's feet, his heart incomparably sad. "Young master please give Jining a way out for the sake of us being cousins." He Jichu looked at Qin Ziyuan who was kneeling at his feet and sighed. This was what biological brothers should be like. Something had happened to his younger brother, and his older brother had tried his best to save him at all costs. But what about Nianji? She had almost lost her life. As her fiancée, he couldn't even redress her grievances. If he had known that he couldn't do anything, he might as well have let go earlier. She wouldn't have suffered this undeserved calamity. He thought about the call he had just received from Gun Yanji. She had thanked him with a smile on the phone and had even said that she was already recovering. He Jichu closed his eyes. He felt his eyes were dry and astringent. He was in so much pain and despair that he couldn't even shed tears. He clenched his fists and coldly rejected Qin Ziyuan. No. Who does Qin Yaoguang think she is? She can shoot whoever she wants to be shot, and she can release whoever she wants to be released. She has no right to interfere in this matter from the beginning to the end. This was today's 5,000-word chapter, Chapter 1561, It's Better to Let Go Earlier. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. There are no more at night. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1573. Qin Ziyuan was stunned by He Zhichu's words. He quickly asked anxiously, "Then what do you mean? Are you still going to shoot my brother? But he really doesn't deserve to die." He Zhichu raised his hand and pressed it on Qin Ziyuan's shoulder. His almond-shaped eyes were dark as he said coldly, "Whether he lives or dies, Qin Yaoguang doesn't have the final say and neither do I." "Then who? Who has the final say?" "Your father." "But I begged your father and he said." Before Qin Ziyuan could finish, He Zhichu interrupted him. "Of course the victim has the final say." Qin Ziyuan's heart turned cold. He looked at He Zhichu angrily. "Zhichu, my cousin hasn't offended you all these years, has he? You're playing with your cousin like this. You clearly know that Gu Nianji is already dead, and you still want her to have the final say. If you want him to die, just say it." He Zhichu's tone was cold and his almond-shaped eyes seemed to be brewing with snow. "Who said she's dead? Who told you she's dead?" Qin Ziyuan, his heart, which had just sunk to the bottom of the valley, suddenly started beating violently. "You mean she's not dead? She's really not dead? That's great." Qin Ziyuan wiped the sweat off his forehead, but he was still so happy that he started crying. No matter what, since the victim wasn't dead, then his brother's life was saved. "You're good, He Zhichu. How dare you play with your cousin like this?" Qin Ziyuan punched He Zhichu's shoulder and laughed with tears in his eyes. "Do you know how anxious I was?" He Zhichu sat back on the sofa, crossed his legs and said coldly, "Who told you to come here and stir up trouble? No one told you that Jining would be shot. How can you be justified in jumping around and being used as a gun?" Qin Ziyuan finally understood that someone had been messing with him behind his back from the beginning to the end. "My brother won't be shot at all, right?" Qin Ziyuan rubbed his head and sat down opposite He Zhichu. The curtains in the room were not open, and the well-shaped ceiling lamp on the ceiling emitted a white light. It poured down from He Zhichu's head and shrouded his face in shadows. He Zhichu held his coffee cup with 2 fingers and said dryly, "I told you whether he will be shot or not depends on whether the victim forgives him. That's why you were blindly involved. But he's my younger brother. Tell me where Gu Nianji is. I'll go beg her myself. I'll agree to anything she asks for." Qin Ziyuan hurriedly expressed his conditions. "What if she wants your brother to die?" He Zhichu scoffed. "Don't be so sure." Qin Ziyuan choked for a moment and said with a bitter smile, "Zhichu, you don't understand how I feel. When I found out that my brother might be shot, I really felt like the sky was going to fall. My parents died early and my younger brother and I were dependent on each other. We lived in an orphanage for several years before we were found by your mother, my aunt, and brought to the capital to be raised. If I can't save him, how can I face my parents in the afterlife?" He Zhichu was silent for a while, then said, "I understand how you feel. That's how I felt when I saw Nianji get shot in the back and stop breathing in my arms. The sky is falling and I don't want to live anymore." Qin Ziyuan closed his eyes. "I understand. Zhichu, Nianji is your fiancé. You've always liked her. Jining has gone too far this time. I'll teach him well. Maybe I'll let him retire from the army." He Zhichu sipped his coffee and looked up after a while. "I said, don't interfere in this matter anymore. I still have a use for Qin Jining. Someone wants to use him to stir up trouble. It's not safe to let him out." Qin Ziyuan's heart was still hanging in the air. He really wanted to see Gu Nianji. However, He Zhichu said, "Nianji has just recovered from her serious injury, so she can't be too tired. Don't worry, if she doesn't nod, Jining won't be shot." Qin Ziyuan quickly said, "I just want to see her. After all, it was my brother's fault. As his brother, it's okay for me to apologize and compensate him on his behalf, right?" "Okay, you wait first. We'll talk about it when there's a chance." He Zhichu was in a bad mood, but he reminded Qin Ziyuan, "Don't worry about Qin Yaoguang. Don't spread the news that Nianji isn't dead. After all, someone is waiting for her to receive her body and hold a funeral." Qin Ziyuan saw that He Zhichu was fighting with his ex-mother. He rubbed his nose and said, "So that's how it is. Looks like I've really been used as a gun." After Qin Ziyuan left, He Zhichu called He Qingjian and said righteously, "General He, please transfer Qin Jining's case to me. No one else is allowed to interfere." He Chengjian was delighted to see that He Jichu was finally willing to call him. He agreed immediately. Okay. I'll do whatever you say. I don't care about Qin Jining anymore. Do whatever you want. He Jichu snorted and said, and Qin Yaoguang, when are you officially divorcing her? He Chengjian immediately said, immediately. I'll get the people from the Civil Affairs Bureau to personally handle the procedures. After finally kicking Qin Yaoguang out of the He family, He Jichu was still unhappy. He said angrily, this woman is crazy. Why didn't I know she was so crazy before? He Jichu could no longer restrain her evil intentions towards Gun Yanji. Just thinking about it made him sick. He Chengjian also knew that Qin Yaoguang's condition was for Gun Yanji's body. He sighed and said, your mother was right back then. If the development of technology doesn't have laws, morals and ethics, it won't be human progress but a disaster. Back then I thought Gu Xiangwen was the only crazy person. Now, it seems that all these people who only have science in their minds are crazy. Look at Qin Yaoguang. What has she become? When I first met her, she was still a smart and intelligent scientist who devoted herself to learning. Now she has become a monster without any humanity. He Jichu's eyes flashed, and he changed the topic without batting an eyelid. Father, Nianji managed to survive this time. Don't worry about me and her anymore. If you do, I'm afraid I'll do something that will make you sad for the rest of your life. He Chengjian was afraid of He Jichu's threat. This son of his had risked his life to go to the other world to look for Gun Yanji. Now, if Gun Yanji lost her life on their side, he didn't know what his son would do. This time, Gun Yanji had unexpectedly chosen to commit suicide, and He Chengjian had also been severely shaken. He couldn't say a word as he watched the video of her resolutely dying. Children are all debts. He Chengjian shook his head. Don't worry, I won't meddle in your affairs anymore, but you have to hurry up. He was a father after all, so he couldn't help nagging. He Jichu nodded perfunctorily. I know what I'm doing. You're doing me a great favor by not meddling. He Chengjian solemnly promised that he and Gun Yanji would have the right to decide their relationship freely. Then he asked fawningly, Jichu, today is Christmas Eve. Our He family's Christmas ball is tonight. Will you come back? He Jichu grunted. You're already divorced, so of course I'll come back. He Chengjian was overjoyed. Then I'll get someone to decorate the ball hall again. By the way, do you want an invitation? I'll get someone to send it to you. You can invite your own friends, colleagues and subordinates. The He family's Christmas ball was considered an annual event in the Wuxia Empire. It received more attention than their national television station's Spring Festival Gala. Although the ball wasn't broadcasted live, the people who entered the ball would walk the red carpet at the entrance. The major media outlets usually couldn't get invitations, so they could only take photos of the people attending the ball at the entrance of the He family's house and post them online to show off. In addition to the big shots of the cabinet, parliament and military and their families, there were also a small number of invitations for outstanding people in the business, entertainment, sports and academic world. The number of these people was very small, less than 50 people a year, so the competition in this area was very fierce. It was much harder than getting an invitation to the Oscars. He Jichu hadn't been here for the past few years and hadn't appeared at the Christmas ball. Secretary Lin had even used this opportunity to chat with him last time. One of the reasons He Jichu called He Chengjian was because of this Christmas black invitation. He nodded. I need some invitations. How many can you give me? Ah Chu, don't talk to your old father like that. He Chengjian felt very sad. This is your home. Tonight's Christmas ball is your home ground. You'll be hosting it. You can have as many invitations as you want. He Jichu's voice softened a little. Okay, give me 10. I have some friends to invite. No problem. I'll get someone to send you 20. If it's not enough, I'll make it up to you. He Chengjian quickly called his personal secretary in charge of the Christmas ball and instructed them to fulfill He Jichu's request. He Chengjian's personal secretary naturally knew how important He Jichu was. Moreover, He Jichu was certain to take over He Chengjian's position in the future. He was their future leader. He might not curry favor with him now, but he definitely wouldn't make things difficult for him now and make him angry. Only a fool would deliberately make things difficult for his future leader. After getting the invitation, He Jichu called Gun Yanji. Young Master He? What's the matter? Gun Yanji put on her Bluetooth headset and continued playing the game as she answered the phone. He Jichu's voice was very gentle. Yanji, Qin Jining's brother, Qin Ziyuan, came to see me today. He said that Qin Yaoguang gave him a condition. As long as you hand over your body to her, she won't ask for Qin Jining to be shot. Gu Nianji was so angry that she pressed the wrong button. The character in the game accidentally fell to the ground and turned into a box. Who does this Qin Yaoguang think she is? How can she be so shameless? Is she trying to anger me to death so that she can inherit all of my inheritance? Gu Nianji was no longer in the mood to eat chicken dinner. She logged out of the game and said angrily, "She still wants my body? Does she want me to die that badly? No, I can't take it anymore. Even if she's my biological mother, she's too much." He Jichu knew that she would be angry, so he quickly advised, "Don't get agitated. Besides, how could I let you suffer? I just wanted to remind you." Good reminder. Gu Nianji lay down on the sofa and crossed one of her long legs. She said lazily, "I remember that I haven't made a will yet. I'll get a lawyer to come and make a will immediately. If I'm really angered to death by her, I can't let my inheritance fall into her hands." According to the inheritance law of the Wuxia Empire, Gu Nianji was considered unmarried and childless, so her first heirs were her father and mother. Her father was already a dead man according to the law here, so the only legal heir was her biological mother, Qin Yaoguang. Gu Nianji was so angry that she wanted to hit someone when she thought that if she really died this time, then all of her things, including her body, might belong to Qin Yaoguang. I made a mistake. Gu Nianji mumbled. "I want to make a very detailed will immediately. The first clause is that Qin Yaoguang can't get a single cent of my assets." He Jichu saw that she was still so lively, as if he could see her lively expression blooming in front of him. His mood suddenly improved and he laughed. "Okay, I have a lawyer's license. Do you want me to come over and make a will for you?" Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. "I'll go to your place, okay? Didn't you say you were at a nearby base?" Gu Nianji had checked the map at that place. It was where He Xiaoheng's Special Operations Forces base in Sea City was located in the other world. She had lived there for 6 years. "Okay, I'll pick you up." He Jichu was now completely obedient to her. He had even restrained his young master's temper that he used to lose control of. Gu Nianji put down the phone and said to Lu Jin, "Dad, I'm going to young master his base to make a will." Lu Jin's heart skipped a beat. "What will? You're just a child, don't talk nonsense. This is just a legal document." Gu Nianji pressed Lu Jin's shoulder and made him sit down on the sofa. "Don't worry. Although I don't have as much money as you here, I've made a small fortune. Most importantly, I want to decide the ownership of my body. I can't let that be *TCH trample on my body, in the name of my biological mother." Lu Jin turned his head in shock. "What body? What are you talking about?" Gu Nianji didn't hide it from Lu Jin. "Young master, he just told me that Qin Yaoguang used me to negotiate terms with someone else. I can't take it anymore." Lu Jin was anxious. "You want to go against Qin Yaoguang? She can do anything. Don't do anything rash." "I'll think about it," Gu Nianji promised Lu Jin. "Dad, don't worry, I won't be rash. She's not qualified to play legal games with me." Lu Jin's expression was uncertain. He lowered his head and thought for a while, then said, "Do you want me to stand up? Maybe she'll turn her attention to me." Gu Nianji quickly shook her head. "Of course not. You finally got rid of that *TCH. How can I let you go out and be disgusted by her again? So okay, I really have a way." She actually didn't have much confidence, but she couldn't let Lu Jin worry. Her confident look had indeed convinced Lu Jin. After all, in Lu Jin's heart, both father and daughter were extremely intelligent people. If Gu Nianji said she had a way, then she definitely had a way. And even if Gu Nianji failed, it didn't matter. He would be responsible. If Qin Yaoguang didn't even let Gu Nianji go, Lu Jin would drag her down with him before he went to hell. The two of them talked for a while before the doorbell rang. He Jichu stood at the door and personally came to welcome her to his base. Gu Nianji opened the door alone and smiled. "Young master, you're really fast. It's not far, it's just next door." He Jichu looked her up and down. He hadn't seen her for more than a month, and the longing in his heart had gathered into a river. However, it could only flow quietly under the snow and ice. There would never be a day when he would see the light of day again. "You're recovering well." He Jichu suppressed the emotions in his heart and smiled gently. "It's just that your lips are still a little pale." Gu Nianji's lips were very plump. Now that they were slightly pale, it was obvious that they were white. Gu Nianji looked up and smiled. "Then there's nothing I can do. I was injured too badly this time. I'm already very satisfied that I managed to recover to this state after a narrow escape from death. I never put pressure on myself." "That's good." He Jichu nodded and led her to the base next to him. Hijichu's bulletproof car was surrounded by armed soldiers. A line of military vehicles opened up the way from the front and back, and they drove majestically towards the base 200 meters away. The cars in front had already entered the base, and the cars behind were still at the entrance of Gunyenji's neighborhood. Gunyenji turned around to look at the long line of cars and laughed in shock. "Young master, isn't this too much? Do you have to put on such a big show?" Hijichu said nonchalantly, "That's a big show? Didn't you see the surrounding residential buildings? My snipers are watching the entire scene from all the key places. If anyone dares to move, I'll blow her head off immediately." Gunyenji lowered her head like Lu Jin. "Boss, you're so amazing." Hijichu rubbed her head. "Stop fooling around. Isn't this all for you? Don't you know that she's waiting for your body? If I don't protect you well, how can I live up to that touching motherly love?" Gunyenji wrinkled her delicate little nose and said with a fierce expression, "I've had enough too. After I make my will today, I'll teach her a lesson." Hijichu immediately said, "No problem. She just divorced my father." "Gunyenji, were the two related?" Gunyenji looked at Hijichu with a half-smile. "Young master, even if she still misses do you believe me?" "I believe you, I believe you. Of course I believe you." Hijichu raised his hands and said with a smile, "Her Majesty, Queen Gu's words are as good as gold." "Young master, why are you suddenly so humorous?" Gunyenji rubbed her nose and looked at him sideways. "You've changed a lot." Hijichu looked at her and thought to himself, if I can't change my heart, what's so difficult about changing my behavior? The two of them chatted and laughed as they arrived at Hijichu's official residence. Gunyenji looked around. Although it was the same place, the buildings inside were completely different. Only the small hill not far away looked the same. She couldn't find the feeling of being there, so her mood dropped. She followed Hijichu into his official residence and began to draft her will without any distractions. They were both big lawyers, and this kind of will had a template. The two of them finished it in less than half an hour. She signed her name and made it in triplicate, and it would take effect. Gunyenji kissed the will she had just made in satisfaction and said mockingly, "Mom doesn't have to worry about my body anymore." Hijichu, he took out a stack of invitations to tonight's Christmas ball and said, "Nyenji, today is Christmas Eve. Our family has a grand Christmas ball every year. Would you like to attend this Christmas ball with me today?" Gunyenji reflexively refused. "Young master, that's not a good idea, is it? The Qin Private Hospital Group has 2 invitations. I wonder if Qin Yaoguang will go tonight," Hijichu said casually. Hijichu said casually, "But I want you to host and dance with me at this ball. Then I'll announce that I recognize you as my sister." This was a public annulment of the engagement between the two of them in disguise. This was today's 5,000-word chapter. Chapter 1562, Her Majesty Queen Gu's Golden Words. A reminder to everyone about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today was Monday, especially the recommendation votes. There were no more at night. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1574. Huh. You want me to be your sister? Gunyenji's big eyes, which had a natural contact lens effect, almost widened. "Young master, speak properly. Don't be so surprised. I'm timid and I'm scared. My heart hasn't fully recovered yet." She couldn't stand such a sudden stimulation. She clutched her chest, feeling a faint pain rising from there. Hijichu frowned slightly and glanced at her, clutching her chest. "What's wrong? Has your heart not fully recovered yet?" He remembered the power of that shot. Even now, he often saw her stop breathing in his nightmares. "How can it be that fast? It still hurts when you're caught off guard." Gunyenji patted it lightly and said embarrassedly, "Actually, you don't have to be like this. Since the Christmas ball is so grand, you can have fun. I won't be going." She had been locked up in her apartment for more than a month and was used to living with only 2 or 3 people. She was still a little unused to suddenly going to the He family's Christmas ball, which was bustling with noise and glamorous clothes. Hijichu put his hands in his trouser pockets and sat back on the windowsill. He stretched his long legs and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes sparkled. Tonight's ball will be the most watched place in the entire country. Everything that happens here will spread throughout the country as quickly as possible. If you don't want your mother to think about your body anymore, you can't miss this opportunity. Gunyenji instantly understood Hijichu's intentions and glared at him. "Young master, you've learned bad things now. You're no longer reckless, but you know how to take a roundabout route to achieve the best goal." "I've learned from my mistakes." I've already learned a few times, so I'm naturally more intelligent. Hijichu pointed at his head and smiled teasingly. How about it? Think about it. You don't have to make a decision right away. You can go back and discuss it with President Liu and the others. You still have 4 hours to make a decision. Hijichu looked at his watch. The other 3 hours will be needed to fly back to the imperial capital. In other words, there were still 7 hours until the Christmas ball began. Gu Nianji, it was undeniable that she was tempted by this opportunity. In order to get rid of Qin Yaoguang, she had specially made a will today, but this was only the first step. The most important step was to shut Qin Yaoguang's mouth and prevent her from claiming to be her biological mother. To her, she was only a biological mother at best, and a mother in the legal sense was much more complicated than a biological mother. She pondered for a moment and said, "All right, I'll go back and think about it carefully. I'll give you an answer in 4 hours." Hijichu planned to take her on his private plane back to the imperial capital. This was also the safest way. Hijichu walked Gu Nianji back to her apartment complex and patted her shoulder. "Don't make me wait too long." Gu Nianji nodded and watched Hijichu's silhouette disappear into the elevator before turning to open the door and enter. In the apartment, Lu Yuan also came. He sat on the sofa and looked at the documents in his hands. Lu Jin was standing in front of the window with a special pair of binoculars. He was looking out of the window somewhere. When he heard the door open, he turned around and his eyes lit up. "Nianji, you're back." It was as if they hadn't seen each other for hundreds of years. In fact, Gu Nianji had only been out for less than an hour. Lu Yuan sat on the sofa and said without looking up, "Lu Jin, wake up. Ever since Nianji left the house, you've been looking at Hijichu's residence with a far-infrared high-powered telescope. You're just short of directly connecting to the communication satellite to see what's going on inside Hijichu's official residence." Lu Jin wasn't ashamed of it. Instead, he was proud of it. He smiled and said, "Actually, I've always wanted to launch my own satellite, but Boss Lu was too cautious and refused to agree." Gu Nianji, this was too exaggerated. However, the telescope in Lu Jin's hand did look very tall. She was sure that Major General Hua and the others didn't have such a high-end telescope. Gu Nianji walked over with a smile and said curiously, "This telescope is so powerful. Can I have a look at it?" Lu Jin immediately stuffed it into her hand and said generously, "I'll give it to you. You can look at it however you want." It was great to have a father like this. Gu Nianji naturally tiptoed and kissed Lu Jin on the cheek. "Thank you, Dad." Lu Jin was dizzy from the kiss. All the blood in his body seemed to rush to his face, and his brain was about to suffocate from lack of oxygen. He was on the verge of collapse and quickly held onto the windowsill behind him to steady himself. Gu Nianji patted Lu Jin on the shoulder and asked nervously, "Dad, are you okay?" I'm fine." Lu Jin came back to his senses and shook his head to shake off the chaotic stars in front of his eyes. He said, "Good girl, did you go to Hijichu's place to make your will?" Gu Nianji nodded and held Lu Jin's arm as she walked to the sofa and sat down. Lu Yuan raised his eyelids and looked at Lu Jin. He said expressionlessly, "Lu Jin, are you crippled? You need someone to help you walk." "I know you're jealous of me, Boss Lu." Lu Jin didn't hesitate to poke at Lu Yuan's sore spot. "You're already so old, yet you don't get close to women or men. You don't have any children. I'll see what you'll do when you get old." Lu Yuan scoffed and shook his head. He said casually, "What's wrong with that? I can be like you and artificially inseminate myself to have a child and retire." A knife stabbed into Lu Jin's heart. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lu Yuan regretted it. He glanced at Gu Nianji, worried that she would feel uncomfortable. Because he had been mocking Lu Jin, he had forgotten that Gu Nianji was also here. However, Gu Nianji was almost as big-hearted as Lu Jin. She didn't think about herself at all. Instead, she smiled widely and said, "Then does President Liu have a woman he likes to provide egg cells for? Dad, do you know any unmarried women of the right age who admire President Liu?" This was the first time Lu Jin had bickered with Lu Yuan, and his daughter had helped him. He couldn't help laughing and said, "A woman he likes? Ah, I guess she hasn't been born yet." Lu Yuan? He really wanted to sew this person's mouth shut. Gu Nianji quickly coughed and tugged at Lu Jin's sleeve. She changed the topic and said, "Dad, young master he just said that he wants to invite me to the He family's Christmas party tonight. Do you think I should go?" "The He family's Christmas party? It's very grand and fun. If you want to go, then go. If you don't want to go, then don't go. Don't feel any psychological burden." Lu Jin patted the back of her hand and said with a smile, But if you want to go, you have to be the opening dancer of the party. Otherwise we won't go. Gu Nianji, Lu Yuan pretended not to hear Lu Jin's off-key suggestion. He put away the iPad in his hand and said amiably, Nianji, do you want to go? I want to go a little. Gu Nianji used her right thumb and index finger to gesture the distance of a grain of rice. She frowned and said, but I don't know if I can achieve my goal. What goal? Lu Yuan and Lu Jin asked together. Gu Nianji looked at Lu Jin, then at Lu Yuan. In the end, her gaze stopped on Lu Yuan. After all, Lu Yuan's suggestion was more objective, unlike Lu Jin. When it came to Gu Nianji, he didn't know how to write the word objective at all. President Lu, do you know what my mother has done recently? Gu Nianji started from the beginning. She went around shouting that she wanted to avenge me, so she asked for Qin Jining to be shot. Then, when Qin Jining's brother, Qin Ziyuan, came to plead for mercy, she said that as long as young master he handed over my body, she would spare Qin Jining's life. Lu Yuan smiled. So, that's why I was so disgusted. I really wanted to teach her a lesson so that she wouldn't use my mother's name to do things that were worse than beasts. Gu Nianji clasped her hands together in front of her chest, her face full of indignation. Also, what does Qin Jining's matter have to do with her? Why should she be shot if she wants to be shot? Is there any law left? Lu Yuan placed the iPad on the coffee table in front of him and reminded her, I've heard about Qin Jining, but I advise you not to make a fuss about it. Gu Nianji didn't understand and asked in return, why not? I thought this was a good entry point. Think about it carefully. How long has Qin Yaoguang been asking for Qin Jining to be shot? Lu Yuan told Gu Nianji about the matter patiently and meticulously. Gu Nianji was also very studious. Her dark jade-like eyes darted around slightly. At least 2 weeks. Has Qin Jining been shot? Gu Nianji shook her head. Of course not. If he's already been shot, what can she use to negotiate with Qin Ziyuan to do a favor? That's right. Yi Qingjian is a cunning man. How could he do whatever Qin Yaoguang wants? Lu Yuan tapped his finger on the glass surface of the coffee table. Look, in fact, she was the only one making a fuss and jumping up and down. After 2 weeks, there was no movement, so she had to find another gun to help her scout the way. Gu Nianji's eyes widened in realization. Are you saying that Qin Ziyuan also fell into her trap? Was he lured back by her? Most likely. Lu Yuan nodded. I analyzed it from a common-sense perspective. Qin Jining's department isn't an ordinary department. Qin Jining's case is all confidential. How could Qin Yaoguang have a foot in Qin Jining's case? But she's my mother. She speaks as the victim's mother, so she does have a certain amount of power and meaning, Gu Nianji said resentfully. Gu Nianji said angrily, I just wanted to catch her off guard tonight so that she won't be able to use my name to swindle people anymore. This is today's first update, Chapter 1563, Probably Not Born Yet. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Since all of you strongly requested at least 2 updates a day, even if you split the big chapter into small chapters, I'll do as you're told. There was another chapter at 8 in the evening. If there were more updates in the future, it would be 3 updates. Are you happy? Are you surprised? P.S. Thank you to the leader of Enigma Yangxi and 100 million chasing you for the 10,000 Chidian coins each yesterday. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1575. Lu Yuan glanced at Lu Jin without batting an eyelid, but Lu Jin lowered his head. He no longer had the smug attitude he had just now. Gu Nianji was still hesitating. President Lu, do you think I should go? Young master, he said he would invite me to dance with him and publicly announce that he would recognize me as his sister. Lu Jin suddenly raised his head, his eyes even rounder than Gu Nianji's. Do what? Sister. Gu Nianji looked at Lu Jin in confusion, then at Lu Yuan. She said resentfully, actually when we were over there, young master he had already said once that he wanted to treat me as his sister. But after we came here, he changed his mind. Lu Yuan smiled knowingly and said gently, that's not surprising. Our Nianji is so good, who wouldn't like her? This means that he hasn't given up on liking you. He had no choice but to give in to her over there. When he got here he didn't. Your fiancé would naturally have other thoughts. Gu Nianji had been trained by Lu Jin to be much more thick-skinned recently. She could remain calm in the face of overwhelming praise and praise. However, when Lu Yuan said it casually, she suddenly blushed and tried her best to resist the urge to cover her face. Gu Nianji was embarrassed and modest. President Lu is exaggerating. I'm not that good. She thought silently that these two probably didn't know that she had spent a lot of effort to woo Major General Hua in the other world. Nianji is too modest. That's not like your father, Lu Yuan teased humorously. Of course my daughter is good. People who like her have good taste and intelligence. People who don't like her not only have bad taste, but also have problems with their intelligence. Lu Jin came back to his senses and quickly added, afraid that he would miss any opportunity to praise Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji pursed her lips helplessly and said, all right. Your daughter isn't loved by everyone. Flowers bloom when they see flowers. She's just generally likable. Lu Yuan? He took back what he had just said. This father and daughter were really the same kind of people. Lu Jin's expression was matter-of-fact as he held Gu Nianji's hand and said, Ijichu wants to break off the engagement with you? Announcing that he would recognize her as his younger sister meant that he was going to break off the engagement. Gu Nianji nodded. Yeah, to be honest, he's always been good to me. It's just, we're really not compatible. I see him as an older brother, so I can't have romantic feelings for him. The corners of Lu Jin's mouth twitched. But if he wants to acknowledge you as his sister, will he Qingjian agree? Gu Nianji shrugged indifferently. He has to agree even if he doesn't agree. I believe young master he will make him agree. Lu Yuan laughed. Yes, He Qingjian's only weakness is his son. Whoever controlled his son would be able to control He Qingjian. Now it seems that our Nianji has the potential. Gu Nianji quickly waved her hand. No. As long as General He lets me go, I won't dare to control him. She knew very well that this time she had fought with her death to move He Jichu, not He Qingjian. In the end he still couldn't win against her. A part of Gu Nianji's heart softened. For the sake of He Jichu's concession and letting go, he had left an eternal mark in her heart. Lu Jin lowered his head and calculated for a long time. He turned a deaf ear to Gu Nianji and Lu Yuan's chatting. Finally he suddenly asked, Boss Lu, do you have an invitation from the He family? Yes, our Lu Corporation has 2 every year. Lu Yuan nodded with a smile. Secretary Lin and I go every year. What's wrong? Are you going this year too? Lu Jin made up his mind. If Nianji wants to go, I have to go too. Dad, don't go. Gu Nianji knew that Lu Jin had been hiding from the He family all these years and didn't get too close to his old acquaintances. Although he had undergone plastic surgery and even his voice was different from before, his style of doing things was too unique. If it was someone who was very familiar with him after spending a long time with him, they might remember the genius scientist Gu Xiangguan who had an interpersonal disorder. Gu Nianji didn't want Lu Jin to be in danger again because of her. Lu Jin stared at Gu Nianji's beautiful face and insisted, It's okay. I'm just going to watch the show. I won't give myself away. Gu Nianji, something didn't sound right. She shook her head and insisted, Dad, you really don't go. President Lu can go with me. You can stay at the back and provide us with technical support, okay? Technical support? Lu Yuan didn't know what Gu Nianji wanted to do. What kind of technical support? Gu Nianji smiled and gestured for him to make a phone call. It's to monitor the scene and inform us in time. Lu Yuan frowned. But the He family's Christmas party has very strong security measures. Our company can't interfere at all. According to Gu Nianji's idea, she had to hack into the He family's mansion's surveillance system. That system could be said to be one of the highest level security systems in the Wuxia Empire. Lu Jin smiled. That's no problem. I'll go hack into their security system now. Daughter, wait for me. I'll give you something good. He ran up to his room in high spirits. Lu Yuan looked at Lu Jin's back and scoffed. What a good second brother Lu. He's actually hiding it from me? President Lu, what do you mean? Why are you talking about my father like that? Gu Nianji pouted unhappily. Just like how Lu Jin protected Gu Nianji all the time, Gu Nianji also subconsciously protected Lu Jin. She didn't allow anyone to have any contemptuous emotions or attitudes towards him. If there was, she would attack them whenever she saw them. If it was light, she would make them doubt their lives, or if it was heavy, she would make them commit suicide. Lu Yuan was also very happy to see that the father and daughter were getting along well. He smiled and said, Your father is so cunning. I asked him to test the He family's security system in the past, but he actually said it was too complicated and couldn't be cracked. So it wasn't that he couldn't crack it, but that he wouldn't let me crack it. Gu Nianji needed him to crack it, so he immediately started. Gu Nianji was happy to hear that, but she still tried her best to put on a humble expression. She said, No, President Lu is overthinking things. Of course my father treats me better. Isn't that only natural? You won't be angry, will you? Lu Yuan. He had to admit that Lu Jin's daughter was really well versed in Lu Jin's teachings. He didn't lower himself to the same level as the father and daughter. He calmly picked up the iPad and opened the invitation system. He looked at the guests tonight and said, "It's really lively today. 100 more invitations were sent out than in previous years. It seems like it's to welcome He Jichu home. He hasn't attended the He family's Christmas party in 4 years." Gu Nianji was lost in thought for a while before she finally decided. "Then I'll agree to attend with young Master He." Lu Yuan looked up at her. "Have you thought it through?" "I just checked. The Qin Corporation has a total of 4 invitations. Qin Yaoguang, Old Master Qin, Wen Shuyi, and one of Qin Yaoguang's cousins are all going to attend." Gu Nianji frowned. "Wen Shuyi? Why is she attending with the Qin Corporation? Qin Yaoguang just divorced He Qingjian today, and she's going to the He family's Christmas party tonight. Why is her face so hot?" Gu Nianji muttered. She couldn't help but want to give Qin Yaoguang a thumbs up for her psychological endurance. Was it because people with thick skin had a stronger psychological endurance? Lu Yuan clicked on the information he had collected about Qin Yaoguang and solemnly reminded her, a woman who was able to be good friends with her ex-fiancé's family for 30 years after her engagement was broken off, and a woman who used her own daughter as an experiment can't be treated with common sense. Don't underestimate your opponent just because you won against her once. She's also an outstanding medical and biologist. She was the first person to propose the theory of gene editing. She's only one step away from winning the Nobel Prize. This is today's second update, Chapter 1564, Forever Branded. Reminder: monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. I asked for the wrong vote this morning. I should have asked for a monthly vote, but I ended up asking for a recommendation vote. Good night, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1576. Her? She's so close to the Nobel Prize. Gu Nianji looked like she had been struck by lightning, which made Lu Yuan laugh. He wasn't young anymore, but after the baptism of time, his smile had a captivating charm. It was like an aged wine that became more fragrant the older it was. At that moment, Lu Jin came down from the second floor with a laptop in his arms. He sat down beside Gu Nianji. "It's the truth. If you don't believe me, ask your father." Lu Yuan raised his chin at Lu Jin. Gu Nianji quickly turned to look at Lu Jin, who had just sat down, and pushed his arm. "Is that so? Is she really that good?" Lu Jin sighed, which was rare for him. "It's true. Qin Yaoguang is quite accomplished academically." To be praised by someone like Lu Jin, Gu Nianji believed that Qin Yaoguang wasn't completely useless. She's indeed very inspired in biomedicine. Lu Jin placed the laptop on the coffee table in front of him and stirred his hands in front of him. He said with a straight face, especially after He Jichu was born and found out about He Jichu's congenital genetic defect, she tried her best to treat him. She came up with the gene editing method to treat He Jichu. "What's gene editing?" Gu Nianji asked curiously. "It sounds very high-end." From a theoretical point of view, gene editing is the re-editing of the DNA fragments of the human body, removing the problematic genes and adding in the perfect genes. It can be said that it was the emergence of the gene editing theory that made it possible for the perfect human gene to move from theory to reality. Lu Jin narrowed his eyes at Gu Nianji and suddenly looked away. His hands were clenched into fists and his arms were trembling slightly. He didn't want to say it, but seeing Gu Nianji's confused look, he felt that he should. "Nianji, you're the first human with perfect genes that we've created through gene editing technology, but you're also the last." Lu Jin hugged his head and almost lay on his knees. Although she was mentally prepared for this, Gu Nianji was still shocked by Lu Jin. After a while, she touched the back of her neck and said in disbelief, "Meh? Perfect genes?" Lu Jin hugged his head and nodded. He said in a muffled voice, "You have the only set of pure human genes in the world without any non-human components. You have to know that the current human DNA actually contains 8% non-human DNA. But you didn't. I removed all the non-human genes in your DNA and added intact, supportive human genes. This is still not perfect." As Lu Jin spoke, he gradually raised his head. After all, this was also a very cutting-edge science. For people like him, it was incomparably attractive. He looked ahead, his dark eyes shining. "Nianji, did you know? A truly perfect gene was not only in being completely healthy, without the slightest bit of mutation, but also in being able to automatically repair itself when it was damaged." Allowing the human body's genes to automatically repair itself is the perfect genetic combination. This used to be the result of our research. In the beginning, we only discovered that your genes could automatically repair defective genes, so it was very effective for Hijichu's congenital genetic defect. But in the 4 years after I left, Qin Yaoguang discovered that not only could your genes repair genetic defects, but they could also automatically repair your own physical damage. Your genetic potential is even more perfect than we imagined. Gu Nianji's heart sank, and the smile on her face instantly disappeared. She had the most perfect and purest human genes. Not only could her genes repair damage at the genetic level, but they could also repair damage at the physical level. She finally understood why she was able to quickly recover from such a serious injury without the aid of medicine and surgery. This was her special constitution. It was no wonder that she had been rescued despite being on the verge of death from such a serious gunshot wound. In just over a month, all the wounds on her body had healed to the same extent as before she had been injured. There had been so many small shrapnel embedded in her heart. If it had been a normal person, they would have been dead by now. However, because of the powerful physical repairability brought about by her perfect genes, she had stubbornly survived. The damaged part of her heart and her chest had been repaired to its original state. She stared fixedly at Lu Jin, her expression a little dazed. "Dad, then tell me, am I still considered a human?" She clutched her chest. "Is the beating here a real heart?" Lu Jin looked at her dumbfounded. He hugged her in his arms and stroked her head. He said anxiously, "Nianji, what are you thinking about? Of course you're a human. Half of your genes came from me. I only fixed some of the imperfections in your genes for you, but that's not the main reason. In terms of genetic factors, I've given all my genes to you." His voice was loud and powerful. It was as if he had been enlightened and pulled Gu Nianji back from the brink of cognitive confusion. Her eyes turned from hazy to clear. Her big black and white eyes moved nimbly. She leaned into Lu Jin's arms and listened to his increasingly intense heartbeat. She smiled quietly. "But it sounds like you've made a greater contribution. Why is Qin Yaoguang the one who's one step away from the Nobel Prize and not you?" Gu Nianji looked up and asked crisply. Lu Jin looked down at her and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. He let go of his hand and moved to the side. His gaze wandered as he looked around. "Well, it's different for everyone. Why do you care?" Gu Nianji looked at him suspiciously. "Of course it's different. What are you hiding?" Lu Yuan chuckled and said, "You still can't figure it out? Nianji, because your father has already gotten it." Qin Yaoguang only came up with the concept of gene editing, but it's still a little lacking, so she's still one step away from the Nobel Prize. But your father has long been a Nobel Prize laureate and he's won it twice. One time he made a breakthrough in high-energy magnetic fields and the other time he invented a gene editing tool. Gu Nianji sucked in a breath of cold air. 2 Nobel Prize laureates, one in physics and the other in biomedicine. What was a genius? This was a true genius. He could reach up to the 9th heaven to catch the moon, and he could go down to the 5th ocean to catch turtles. Gu Xiangwen, who was here, used to be a genius scientist who was famous both at home and abroad, right? Gu Nianji suddenly thought of Gu Xiangwen, who was in the other world. He also had the potential to be so smart, right? But he had spent his entire life hiding his identity. Did this mean that people had different fates? Lu Jin saw that Gu Nianji was staring at him in a daze and didn't say anything. He felt a little uncertain, so he moved closer to her and whispered, "Nianji, you weren't even born when I won the prize. I didn't use you as an experimental medium to win the prize. She was born after all of this technology had matured." The corners of Gu Nianji's eyes twitched. Did she care about this? Seeing that she still didn't say anything, Lu Jin became anxious. "What's wrong? Don't you believe me? I can show you my Nobel Prize certificate. It has the time of winning the prize. It was 5 years before you were born. There's also a video of me receiving the prize in Stockholm. It was given to me by the King of Sweden. The 2 prizes weren't much money, so I've already donated them all." The Nobel Prize had exceeded the $1 million mark in recent years. Of course, to Lu Jin it really wasn't much money. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and finally said, "Okay, I believe you. Right now. I'm just too shocked and I'm also a little scared." She looked at Lu Jin's face and finally at Lu Yuan. She said expressionlessly, "I feel like I've become Tang Seng's flesh, or perhaps I've become a ginseng fruit. How many people know about my special physique? Will I still be able to live until tomorrow?" Lu Yuan stopped smiling and became serious. "Nianji, you can doubt me but you can't doubt your father. In order to protect you, He has used all sorts of methods over the years to erase all the data you left in this world. Even the fragments of your genes that Qin Yaoguang once left behind have been modified by him. As long as you don't fall into Qin Yaoguang's hands again, you'll be safe. Qin Yaoguang's ability to repair your genes is also in the testing stage. It's because she's not sure that she's doing everything she can, Gu Nianji continued sarcastically. That's why she's doing everything she can to use my body for experiments. Because Qin Yaoguang didn't believe that she would be able to survive such a serious gunshot wound. So as long as I show up tonight, Qin Yaoguang will know that my genetic repair ability is even more perfect than she knows, right? Gu Nianji calmed down and frowned. What should she do to give Qin Yaoguang a head-on blow and dispel her doubts and covetousness towards her? This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1565, A Real Genius. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. The monthly votes are over 3,500. There are monthly votes and additional updates today, so there are 3 updates today. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the monthly votes will be 3,500 plus updates. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the 3rd update. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1577. Lu Jin saw that Gu Nianji was frowning and thinking hard, so he quickly said, I'll go. If I go, I can get her attention if I want to, so she won't be staring at Nianji. Lu Yuan sighed and said disapprovingly, that's not good. You've looked for many opportunities to get close to Qin Yaoguang over the years, but she's too vigilant. She's worried that she'll be plotted against and unknowingly hypnotized. She even has an anti-hypnosis chip implanted in her brain, so there's no way to control her. Then let's just destroy her body. Gu Nianji made up her mind and blurted out. Her expression was stubborn. She raised her chin slightly and didn't accept any retort. So what if she was her mother? When she thought about how this woman had used Gu Nianji for all kinds of extremely harmful physical experiments since she was 2 years old, just to test the extent to which her genes could repair physical damage, Gu Nianji wanted to do those experiments on this woman again from beginning to end. Give her a taste of her own medicine. Since she didn't treat her as a daughter, she wouldn't treat her as a mother either. Lu Jin and Lu Yuan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. If it were that easy, we would have done it a long time ago. Gu Nianji. Is it that difficult? She was very confused. Does Qin Yaoguang have a lot of bodyguards and guards? Her security level used to be only 1 level lower than He Qingjian's. Think about it yourself. Lu Yuan opened the iPad and showed Gu Nianji a diagram he had made in the past. Look here, every time she goes out, the security guards around her. Gu Nianji glanced at it and was immediately stunned by the little red dots that were everywhere on the diagram. There were so many people protecting her. She said in surprise, this woman is really afraid of death. Of course, she still has so many goals to achieve. How could she bear to die? Lu Jin pursed his lips. And she has several sets of bulletproof vests that I made back then, Gu Nianji. She had been thinking about using a sniper just now. No, don't think about it. Lu Jin's small phone made of bulletproof material could even block heavy sniper bullets, so the bulletproof vests he made must be even more powerful. Gu Nianji muttered, she's armed to the teeth. Are we going to use missiles against her? Don't think about how to deal with her yet. Lu Yuan saw that her thoughts had wandered so far, so he smiled and shook his head. It's better to think about how to appear tonight so that she won't be too surprised. That won't do. Her way of thinking was the same as Hua Xiaoheng's. They believed that the best defense was offense. I have to interrupt her combat effectiveness before she regains her composure to deal with me. Then what do you want to do? Gu Nianji thought about it. On the first day she came to the He family, she had cut off Qin Yaoguang's tendons so that she could no longer perform sophisticated brain surgery. Do my genes have a healing effect on other people's bodies? Gu Nianji suddenly thought of this question. She looked at her own hands. Her fingers were straight and slender with no visible joints at all. She had been injured, but there were no scars on her body, and the wounds were healing well. If Qin Yaoguang knew that her genes could repair other people's physical injuries, she would definitely keep an eye on her. However, Lu Jin quickly shook his head. Your genes are very good at repairing other people's genetic defects, but it's impossible for them to work on physical damage. You mean my genes can only repair my own physical injuries? Gu Nianji's eyes lit up, and she suddenly felt like she had come back to life. In this world, there were very few people with congenital genetic defects like He Zhichu. However, for various reasons, there were many people who had their bodies damaged. Gu Nianji couldn't imagine what it would be like if her genes could also repair other people's physical injuries. Lu Jin explained to her, your genes can repair your own physical injuries. This process requires a complete genetic chain to work together. In other words, if other people also need to rely on genes to repair their physical injuries, they would need all of your genetic chain. And that's impossible. Because it's impossible for a person's genes to be completely replaced with someone else's genes. Gene editing was also a process of editing, eliminating and replacing gene fragments. However, that was only a small part of the targeted replacement. It definitely couldn't replace all the genes. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, that's good. Does Qin Yaoguang know about this? She's not even sure if your genes can repair your own physical injuries, let alone think so far ahead. Lu Jin knew Qin Yaoguang's way of thinking very well. The two of them used to be quite compatible in scientific research. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set up the Gu Qin laboratory together. At that moment, Gu Nianji felt like she had escaped death. Thank the heavens, thank the earth, thank the heavens that she had a father named Lu Jin. Gu Nianji stood up from the sofa and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. She looked out at the blue lake view outside the window and was lost in thought for a while. After getting rid of her biggest worry, her mind was clearly active. Soon she came up with an idea. Let's stick to the original plan. I'll go to the He family's Christmas party with young Master He tonight. She turned her head from the floor-to-ceiling window and smiled. But I'll be in a wheelchair with an oxygen tube in my nose and an 4 drip on my wrist. I'll look like I've just been rescued from the brink of death. Lu Yuan's eyes flashed. That's right. Discuss it with young Master He and ask him to cooperate with you. Gu Nianji smiled and went to call He Jichu. The two of them talked for a long time and finally came to an agreement. An hour later, He Jichu came to pick Gu Nianji up on the plane. When he saw her fully armed, although He Jichu was mentally prepared, he was still shocked and almost stopped breathing. Gu Nianji was sitting in a multifunctional wheelchair. Her waist-length seaweed-like hair had been cut into a shawl. Her palm-sized face had an oxygen tube inserted into it. Her face was so pale that it was almost transparent. It was obvious that she had just recovered from a serious injury. She was wearing a simple black gown, and a thin neck chain peeked out from her collarbone. When she looked at him, her eyelids drooped and she looked weak. It perfectly explained the situation of someone who had just been rescued from the brink of death. Do you need to do this? If He Jichu hadn't seen Gu Nianji alive and kicking just now, he would have been frightened by her appearance. Absolutely. Gu Nianji patted her leg, which still had a soft ash-gray blanket draped over it. It matched her little black dress very well. He Jichu shook his head speechlessly and pushed her wheelchair towards the elevator. After exiting the elevator, a few guards walked over with bulletproof black umbrellas. They covered He Jichu and Gu Nianji and escorted them to the bulletproof car. Because Gu Nianji had discussed it with He Jichu beforehand, He Jichu knew that Gu Nianji was going to the imperial capital in a wheelchair, so he drove a large SUV that could carry the wheelchair directly. The group quickly arrived at the airport and boarded He Jichu's private plane to fly to the imperial capital. Their private plane had just taken off when Lu Yuan and Lu Jin also arrived at the airport and flew to the imperial capital on their own private plane. When the plane arrived at the imperial capital airport, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The He family's Christmas party started at 7 o'clock in the evening. He Jichu took her straight back to the He family's mansion. Gu Nianji had been pushed back in a wheelchair and she had even slept. From an outsider's point of view, she had been sent in a comatose state. Qin Yaoguang didn't want to go to the He family's Christmas party, but her father had already reported her name, and she was throwing a tantrum. I said I'm not going. Why do you have to force me? She smashed an antique Tang tricolor horse ornament on the multi-treasure pavilion. It's because you divorced General He today that you should attend this party. Our Qin family has relied on ourselves to stand at the top of this country. You and General He will part on good terms. It won't affect our business relationship. Old Master Qin tried his best to persuade Qin Yaoguang. Stop fooling around. Go change your clothes. Qin Yaoguang was also very stubborn. She sneered and took another mutton fat jade tube from the multi-treasure pavilion. Without looking at it, she threw it on the ground. I'm not going. What can you do? Old Master Qin was so angry that his liver hurt. He grinned and said, Take it easy. This is mutton fat jade from the Song dynasty. You can't buy it even with money. Qin Yaoguang was about to mock him when Shi knocked on the door and said anxiously, Auntie Qin, Gu Nianji has appeared. Where? Qin Yaoguang's gaze swept over. Is she not dead yet? No, but she hasn't recovered from her serious injury. It's as if she just came out of the operating room. She's in a wheelchair and has a nasal oxygen tube. She's been unconscious for the entire time. When Shi quickly told Qin Yaoguang the news she had heard. How do you know so clearly? It can't be fake news, right? Qin Yaoguang frowned. Of course not. When Shi's voice lowered a little, she quickly glanced at old Master Qin, who was standing next to her, and whispered, My dad told me. He saw it when he was building the bushes at the gate, when Shi's parents were both gardeners for the He family. Although she had been kicked out of the He family, her parents were still working as gardeners for the He family, so they weren't implicated. Because her parents' status was too low, they couldn't even enter the main door of the main house, so the He family didn't bother to kick them out. As when Shi spoke, she showed Qin Yaoguang a photo her father had secretly taken. In the photo, He Jichu carefully pushed a wheelchair across the flower path. The setting sun shone from behind him, shrouding Gu Nianji in front of him in shadow. Gu Nianji, who was wearing a little black dress, looked even paler. She leaned against the back of the wheelchair with her head tilted and didn't move at all. Not only was there a nasal oxygen tube on her face, but there was also a needle in her hand. Qin Yaoguang's pupils constricted, but she quickly relaxed and said nonchalantly, Since she's here, I'll go. She's my daughter after all. I don't know how she survived such a serious injury. This is today's second monthly ticket for 3,500 plus updates. Chapter 1566. Thank the heavens, thank the earth. A reminder for everyone's monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1578. After Gu Nianji was brought back to the He Manor by He Jichu, she was sent directly to her own room. The room was heavily guarded, and only He Jichu personally took care of her inside. He Chengjian heard that He Jichu had returned and brought Gu Nianji back, so he rushed over. Achu, you're back. He Chengjian's gaze swept past He Jichu's face and looked at Gu Nianji, who was sitting in the wheelchair. He couldn't bear to ask. How is her injury? What can I do? Why don't you try it yourself? He Jichu said bluntly without even looking up. Didn't you find a good doctor for her and successfully perform the surgery? He Chengjian had also heard about Gu Nianji's surgery at West Camp Hospital. Yes, if I hadn't found a good doctor, she would have been in the 5th or 7th month. He Jichu said coldly, I want to ask General He, are you satisfied to see her in this half-dead state? Was he going to use her as bait to catch someone? If there is, tell me now and I'll catch him later. He Chengjian was rather embarrassed by his words, but he didn't dare to get angry at all. He said embarrassedly, How many times have you said it? I was wrong, okay? Don't worry, I won't meddle in your affairs anymore. He glanced at Gu Nianji's movements from the corner of his eye and felt both pity and regret. Gu Nianji had suffered such a serious injury. Even if she recovered in the future, her body would not be as good as before. She might not be able to leave the wheelchair for the rest of her life. Being shot in the back was most likely a spinal injury. He Jichu lowered his eyes, his shimmering, sultry eyes flashing. General, he is a man of his word. I hope you will remember what you said. I have my own plans. He Chengjian breathed a sigh of relief and smiled obsequiously. Good. It's good that you're back. I didn't mean anything else. By the way, I've already divorced Qin Yaoguang. I just completed the procedures this morning. And congratulations. He Jichu raised his eyelids and his attitude softened. He Chengjian choked for a moment and quickly asked, Then you'll be hosting the Christmas ball tonight. Who do you plan to dance with? Gu Nianji definitely couldn't do it like this. He Jichu replied without hesitation, Of course it's Nianji. Huh. He Chengjian was stunned. Can she stand up? He Jichu looked back at He Chengjian and smiled wickedly. Who said you can't dance if you're in a wheelchair? I'll show you later. He Chengjian, forget it, he didn't want to argue with his son. Anyway, he could do whatever he wanted. As long as he was willing to come back, he didn't want anything else. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the road near the He family's mansion was filled with all kinds of luxury cars parked on the side of the road. All the well-dressed gentlemen and ladies, rich businessmen, high-ranking officials, celebrities and academics got out of the cars. They all held invitations and walked towards the He family's mansion. On the evening of Christmas Eve, the temperature in the imperial capital had already dropped to -10 degrees Celsius. The cold wind was biting cold, making people feel bone-chilling. It was about a 5-minute walk from the warm car to the greenhouse in front of the He family's mansion. Everyone was so excited that they didn't feel cold at all when they walked over. In the greenhouse, there were staff checking and comparing the invitations, and there were also security personnel conducting security checks for everyone. There were simple stands on both sides of the greenhouse, which were prepared for the news media who couldn't enter. The media personnel carried all kinds of equipment on their backs. Some of them had even turned on a live broadcast to show everyone the grand occasion that happened once a year. The people who could appear here were the true top figures of the empire. Qin Yaoguang and Old Master Qin came over in a modified bulletproof Rolls-Royce Phantom. The car stopped, and the bodyguard sitting in front got down to open the car door for her. 2 other bodyguards surrounded her on both sides. One of the bodyguards even held a bulletproof black umbrella, covering her completely. Qin Yaoguang's expression was as usual. She was dressed in a Vera Wang custom-made champagne-colored lace evening gown. There was only one of it in the world and there was no other one. Her figure was exquisite and curvy, and her waist was slightly round. However, given her age and the fact that she had given birth to a child, she had already taken good care of herself. Her hair was tied into a bun at the back of her head. It's 0.5-carat diamond was pieced together into the shape of a jasmine flower. It was embedded in the headband and circled around the edge of the bun. As she moved, the diamond jasmine headband around the bun on her head almost shone into a rainbow under the night light. Without a doubt, she became the focus of the audience. Old Master Qin was wearing a custom-made Armani suit. He had white hair and a youthful face. He was hale and hearty and he smiled when he saw people. When he greeted them, his voice was loud and pleasant to the ear. Soon he started chatting with a few old friends from the business and political circles. These people still didn't know about Qin Yaoguang and He Qingjian's divorce. When they saw her and Old Master Qin get out of the car, they were a little surprised. They surrounded them and asked carefully, "Old Master Qin, your daughter personally came to pick you up for the Christmas ball?" A few years ago, when He Zhichu wasn't at home, Qin Yaoguang was the hostess of the Christmas ball and hosted the dance with General He. Old Master Qin didn't shy away at all. He smiled and said, "We're all guests today. Everyone, don't be distant with us." All guests? That was interesting. The people who could come today were all smart people. They knew what the song meant, so they didn't ask any further. However, after they returned, these people all muttered in their hearts. Qin Yaoguang, the original hostess, had become a guest today. Didn't that mean that she was no longer a member of the He family? Did that mean that she was divorced? Qin Yaoguang felt like vomiting blood in her heart, but for the sake of a bigger goal, she still tried her best to endure it. She didn't show it on the surface at all. She followed the crowd to the He family's greenhouse. In a trance, it was as if she had returned to more than 30 years ago. She didn't give up and insisted on following her father to see He Qingjian and Qin Suwen's engagement ceremony with her own eyes. It was also on a winter day like this that at the He family's Christmas Eve ball, she wore a bright red silk qipao dress and an Indian ruby pendant on her forehead. She was dressed up in full swing and looked beautiful. However, He Qingjian's gaze didn't linger on her for a moment. He kept looking at the ordinary-looking woman beside him, as if she was all his treasures. That gaze was like a scar that was deeply engraved on Qin Yaoguang's face. After so many years, that scar didn't fade. Instead, it got deeper and deeper. Qin Yaoguang couldn't help raising her hand and touching her face. When Shi followed Qin Yaoguang's cousin out of a bulletproof Cadillac at the back, she took a few quick steps and came to Qin Yaoguang's side. Seeing that she was a little absent-minded, she quickly raised her hand to hold Qin Yaoguang's arm and whispered, "Auntie Qin, are you all right?" Qin Yaoguang came back to her senses and gently patted the back of her hand. She said lightly and mockingly, "I'm fine. I still want to keep my life and see our medical miracle." When Shi curled her lips and swept her gaze across the media stands on both sides of the He family's greenhouse, the people over there received her signal and quickly made their preparations. When Shi followed Qin Yaoguang and slowly walked forward. When they passed by the media stands, a female reporter in a dark red slim-fitting suit stopped them with a microphone and said very enthusiastically, "May I ask if you're Director Qin Yaoguang? I'm very happy to see you here. Your Qin Corporation's private hospital is benevolent and has saved so many lives across the country. I think the people of the country are grateful to you. Your medical skills are world-famous, and you're also one of the best in scientific research. Over the years, you've published many academic papers on brain surgery in the World Medical Journal, and you're internationally famous. I remember that there was a brain surgeon in the United States who once said that Wuxia Qin was a peak that he would never be able to surpass. Your name is so well known that even the deaf can hear you. We are proud to have a doctor like you. She had spoken for a long time without asking a single question. Was this an interview or a speech? A female reporter next to him rolled her eyes impatiently. Qin Yaoguang, on the other hand, was in a much better mood when she heard this. She said humbly, "You're exaggerating. I'm not that good. I just did what I could. I hope that everyone will continue to support our Qin Corporation's private hospital. Our Qin Corporation's private hospital has the best medical team in the world, especially in the field of biological genetics. Soon there will be a major breakthrough in gene therapy. Please wait and see." When Shuyi also said passionately and regretfully, "Our Dean Qin has always been down to earth and honest. He has a straightforward personality and is not good with words. Because he has devoted himself to scientific research, he rarely spends time with General He. In order not to delay General He, our Dean Qin has taken the initiative to give up his personal love life. I hope that everyone can be magnanimous and not hype up this news. Give our Dean Qin and General He some privacy." She cleverly beat up the media and also spread the news that Qin Yaoguang and He Qingjian had divorced. She tried her best to minimize the negative impact. Lu Yuan was sitting in a car not far away. He held his phone and saw the scene. He smiled and said, "This one Shuyi is quite a character. Nianji has a tough battle to fight tonight." He was wearing a Bluetooth headset and talking to Lu Jin. Lu Jin didn't come. He stayed in the apartment and had already cracked the He family's surveillance password. He knew everything that was going on at the scene. It's fine. Nianji's target isn't Wen Shuyi. Lu Jin didn't think much of it. He switched the surveillance screen in front of him to the outside of Gu Nianji's room and waited for her to come out. This was today's third update, Chapter 1567, A Tough Battle Ahead. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1579. In Gu Nianji's room in the He family mansion, He Jichu draped the ash-gray blanket over Gu Nianji's chest and tucked it up to her neck. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and leaned against the headrest of the wheelchair. She looked like she was sleeping soundly. "Many people in the family saw you when you came back." He Qingjian sat down opposite him, crossed his legs and rested one hand on the sofa. "Is it okay? Especially the He family's servants." He Jichu said expressionlessly, "I let them see it on purpose. Otherwise, how could I get the news out?" When Shuyi's father thought that he had secretly taken the photo and that no one would pay attention to an ordinary gardener. Who would have thought that his every move would be monitored by the relevant people? He Jichu had learned from the spy he had planted in the Qin family that Qin Yaoguang had originally refused to attend the Christmas ball. In order for Gu Nianji to successfully deal with Qin Yaoguang, He Jichu had no choice but to make such a gesture. He swaggered back to the He family with Gu Nianji and said that he would bring Gu Nianji along. He knew that as long as Gu Nianji came, Qin Yaoguang would definitely come. And this news had been secretly taken by their own people. To Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shuyi, it would definitely be more credible. He Qingjian nodded. "It's good that you know what you're doing." He looked down at Gu Nianji, who was sleeping in the wheelchair, and said to He Jichu calmly, "That ace of the Far East from the KGB of the Soviet Union, Hua Xiaoheng, the current deputy chief consul of Sea City, is also coming to our Christmas ball today." He Jichu, what's he doing here? He Jichu sat back down with a cold expression on his face. Doesn't their embassy usually not come to such occasions? Not every embassy could get an invitation to the He family's Christmas ball. How could embassies from more than 100 countries receive the same treatment? In the past, because the American ambassador had been a guest at the He family's Christmas ball every year, the Soviet ambassador who didn't get along with them had always declined the invitation. He hadn't expected that this year, the ace of the Far East would take this opportunity to represent the Soviet Union at the He family's Christmas ball for the first time as the deputy chief consul of the Consulate General in Sea City. They brought Dresden to the Soviet Union and kept him under strict surveillance. A hint of mockery appeared on He Qingjian's lips. "Did you know? The only request Mr. Pushin, the leader of the Soviet Union, has for this traitor of the CIA, Mr. Dresden, is to immediately stop all his revelations." He Jichu, that was because Dresden's revelations were all favorable to the United States and unfavorable to other countries. Dresden is playing a loyal traitor. He Jichu's lips curled up, and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes flashed. The CIA can be considered to have racked their brains to plot against other countries. Yi Qingjian nodded. It's obvious that Dresden's so-called traitor incident was a Trojan horse carefully planned by the CIA. They originally wanted to send him to our country to stir up trouble. However, with Yi Qingjian's suspicious personality, he immediately discovered that something was wrong with Dresden. He immediately refused to accept his application for political asylum and sold him to the Soviet Union. At first, the Soviet Union wasn't interested in Dresden, but for some reason in less than 2 days, their attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees. Not only were they extremely interested in Dresden's whereabouts, but they also showed great sincerity and sent over the true body of the KGB's ace of the Far East. Yi Qingjian and He Zhiqiu both knew that the ace of the Far East, Wuxia Chronicles, had shown his face in front of them. This person was considered useless. The Soviet Union had spared no expense to take Dresden away. After taking him away, they had locked him up tightly and prevented him from communicating with the outside world, let alone revealing anything to the outside world. What was their goal? Or rather, what was more important than the ace of the Far East that the Soviet Union would take the initiative to make such an exchange? He Zhiqiu also felt that the Soviet Union might have hidden a deeper reason, but Dresden had already been taken away by the Soviet Union and was under strict control. It was impossible for them to contact Dresden now. But we didn't get nothing. Yi Qingjian was so happy that he forgot He Zhiqiu's taboo. At least it proves that this ace of the Far East, Peter Wuxia Chronicles, is the counterpart of Wuxia Chronicles in the other world. He Zhiqiu's expression darkened. You've gained a lot by using Nianji's life to verify it. Yi Qingjian smiled embarrassedly. Achu, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. He was too embarrassed to stay here any longer. He stood up and said, hurry up and get ready. You and Nianji can't just go out like this, can you? Is she still sleeping? He Zhiqiu looked at Gu Nianji. Yes, I'll wake her up later. Yi Qingjian nodded. Then I'll leave first. There are a lot of guests outside. Their house didn't have a hostess today, and He Qingjian had to deal with the guests. After He Qingjian left, He Zhiqiu also had to take a shower and change his clothes. He looked at Gu Nianji and flicked her forehead lightly. He said aloofly, stop pretending. My dad has already left. Gu Nianji adjusted her breathing and slowly opened her eyes. She looked at He Zhiqiu and coughed embarrassedly. Young Master He, I'm really asleep. There's no silver here. He Zhiqiu retracted his hand. Can you stay by yourself for a while? I'll go back to my room and take a shower. My room is right across from yours. Gu Nianji quickly said, okay. Please go ahead, young Master He. He Zhiqiu had arranged for many soldiers to stand guard in the corridor to protect Gu Nianji's safety. He pushed the door open and said to the soldier at the door, no one is allowed in, including General He. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. The soldier standing guard at the door held the semi-automatic submachine gun in front of his chest and answered loudly. He Zhiqiu walked into his room to take a shower. The corridor outside was quiet. The soldiers standing guard almost covered the entire floor. Gu Nianji sat alone in her wheelchair. After watching the door to her room close, she quietly pressed a button under the armrest of the wheelchair. Her wheelchair was a multi-purpose wheelchair that Lu Jin had meticulously built. The button under the armrest activated the far-infrared detection scan. It could check if there were any secret cameras or recordings in the room. After a minute, the scan ended, proving that there were no secret cameras or recordings in the room. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief and pressed another button to turn on the communication device with Lu Jin. A small display screen slowly rose from behind the wheelchair and landed in front of her. Lu Jin appeared on the screen and greeted her happily. Nianji, are you okay? You didn't encounter any danger, did you? Did anyone make things difficult for you? Gu Nianji smiled and shook her head. No, young master, he took good care of me. Her time was limited, so she tried to keep it short. She didn't have time to nag Lu Jin, so she picked the thing she was most concerned about and asked, Dad, I want to ask again what's going on with the parallel world counterpart. Can't they really coexist in the same world? Gu Nianji had heard He Qingjian mention the identity of the ace of the Far East, Patero. She felt that she had to get to the bottom of this matter. Lu Jin was the real authority on this matter. He Qingjian and the others were using Lu Jin's research results. Lu Jin didn't know why Gu Nianji had suddenly asked this question, but he had always answered her questions. He immediately said, the parallel world counterpart from the most basic point of view, is two organisms with exactly the same DNA. Only DNA is the only characteristic that can be used to confirm the counterpart. Because DNA is the physical indicator of the human body. The parallel universe only recognizes this kind of physical indicator. Let's put it this way. People on both sides of the parallel world can have different names, surnames, identities, occupations, or even nationalities. But as long as their DNA is exactly the same, they are each other's counterparts. And two people like this absolutely cannot coexist in the same spacetime. This is determined by the physical characteristics of the parallel spacetime. Fundamentally speaking, parallel spacetime is derived from the same spacetime, but they are not mirror worlds. Because from the moment they separated, they had their own development path. As time passed, people on both sides had different life trajectories, so not everyone has their own counterpart. Gu Nianji listened very carefully and digested Lu Jin's words word by word. The more she thought about it, the more disappointed she became. She said gloomily, "So as long as there is a counterpart on this side, the people on the other side won't be able to come over alive. Yes, there's nothing we can do about it." Lu Jin sighed and reached out to caress Gu Nianji's gloomy little face on the screen in front of him. There's a limit to one's strength. Nianji, even Dad can't go against the laws of physics. The laws of physics could only be discovered, never created. Gu Nianji took a deep breath and was about to speak when she suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the door. She quickly turned off the screen that showed her conversation with Lu Jin and put it back into a hidden place behind the wheelchair. She then turned on the intercom and asked, "What's the commotion outside?" The soldier at the door was aiming his gun at an old woman with a wrinkled face. She was holding a bouquet of freshly picked flowers in her hand and said with a frown, "Sir, I'm the gardener of the He family's greenhouse. I bring flowers to this room every day." "But young master," he ordered, "that no one is allowed in." "Young master," he is talking about outsiders. "I'm a servant of the He family. That doesn't include me." The old woman looked honest, but her words were actually quite sharp. Gu Nianji laughed when she heard this from inside the room. She said lightly, "I don't need flowers. Please go back." The soldier with the gun at the door quickly said, "Did you hear that? Miss Gu said she doesn't want flowers. You can leave now." The old woman blinked in surprise. "There's someone else inside? Is Miss Gu back?" "Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Gu. I didn't know you were back." Gu Nianji's voice came from the intercom at the door with a mocking smile. "You didn't know? Didn't you all see me when I came in from outside? Now you've exposed yourself." The old woman blushed and thought to herself that Gu Nianji was really sharp-tongued. No wonder she had always had a hard time with her daughter. She quickly nodded and bowed. "I'm sorry." She quickly turned to leave with the flowers in her arms. "Stop." Gu Nianji looked at the surveillance screen at the door and instructed, "Lock her up first. Let her out after the ball is over." "Yes, Miss Gu." The soldier standing guard at the door quickly stopped the old woman who had brought the flowers. After asking He Jichu for permission, he gagged her, tied her up, and threw her into an empty storage room. That night, the living room of the He family's mansion was decorated beautifully and magnificently to welcome the most distinguished guests of the empire. When Shuyi, who was wearing a beautiful blue brocade cheongsam, held a cocktail in her hand. She stood absent-mindedly behind a thick pillar at the entrance of the living room and kept looking at her watch. 30 minutes had passed. Hadn't her mother gone to send flowers to Gu Nianji's room? Why hadn't she come down yet? This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1568, Loyal Trader. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. I forgot to thank my leader, Momo Moshi, for the 10,000 reading points she gave me the day before yesterday. Mwah. There was one more update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Chapter 1580. It was almost 7 o'clock. It was very cold outside, and the cold wind carried the cold air from the extreme north, sweeping through the deep winter night in the imperial capital. When Shuyi looked anxiously at the flower path by the door of the mansion, then turned around and went in, it seemed that something had gone wrong. She suppressed the uneasiness in her heart and walked back into the living room. This used to be a place she was very familiar with. After Gu Nianji suddenly disappeared, she took her place and lived here for a few years. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for her dream to be shattered. When Shuyi's gaze moved from the bustling crowd in the living room to the ceiling above her head, 3 crystal lamps hung from the ceiling in an equilateral triangle. The tubes of these 3 crystal lamps had been specially treated and had a soft light effect. When they shone on the guests' faces, everyone's looks increased more or less. The living room was very spacious, and there were a few pillars in the middle that were as thick as the door. They naturally divided the living room into several areas. There was a mural on the north side facing the door, but Wen Shuyi knew that it was actually a door. In the past, during the Christmas ball, General He and his wife would come out of that door to welcome the worship and cheers of the crowd. This year, He Jichu was back and General He had divorced Auntie Qin. Who would be the woman hosting the ball? Wen Shuyi thought to herself. She separated the crowd and came to Qin Yaoguang's side. She whispered in her ear, "Auntie Qin, there's no movement from Gu Nianji. Didn't you say she's already here? Did your mother send the flowers in?" Qin Yaoguang had a smile on her face as she looked ahead, but her lips moved slightly as she spoke to Wen Shuyi beside her. Wen Shuyi shook her head regretfully. "My mother went, but she hasn't come back yet. I don't know what happened. Could something have happened?" Qin Yaoguang instinctively said, "Have you explained it to your mother? If something happens to her, she can't expose you." Because exposing Wen Shuyi was equivalent to exposing Qin Yaoguang. This was what she really meant. She couldn't be implicated. A trace of disdain flashed in Wen Shuyi's eyes, but she still had a sweet smile on her face. "My mother won't. Even if something happens to her, she won't expose me. I'm their only hope. They love me so much that they would rather die for me than implicate me." That's good, that's good." Qin Yaoguang retracted her gaze and looked at her indifferently. "If anything happens to your parents, I'll compensate you." Wen Shuyi felt a little uncomfortable. Although she had always taken her identity as a gardener's daughter to heart, they were still her biological parents, and they did their best to create all the conditions for her to obtain the best learning resources and fulfill her dreams. Qin Yaoguang, on the other hand, played it down like it wasn't two living human lives, but two discarded items. But Wen Shuyi also knew that Qin Yaoguang was such a person. Not to mention other people's parents, even towards her own daughter, wasn't her attitude terrifyingly cold-blooded? Thinking of this, Wen Shuyi felt relieved. Genius scientists probably had some quirks. Wasn't Gu Xiangwen, who was burned to death, also crazy? She glanced at Qin Yaoguang and smiled fawningly. "Auntie Qin, you're so good to me. This is because you have the ability." Qin Yaoguang smiled and her plump lips curled up. "Just because you stood out. Otherwise, why would I bother with someone who isn't qualified?" Over the past few years, Wen Shuyi had gradually become her right-hand man, and Qin Yaoguang couldn't do without her help. The two of them spoke in low voices for a while. Old Master Qin asked his nephew to come over and invite Qin Yaoguang over. The circle they were in was a little more high-end than the one Qin Yaoguang and Wen Shuyi were standing in. Qin Yaoguang placed the wine glass in Wen Shuyi's hand and followed her cousin over. Wen Shuyi held the two wine glasses just like the waiters who came and went at the ball. She was very embarrassed, so she quickly waved for a waiter to place the two wine glasses on his tray. "Miss Wen, long time no see." Just as she put down the wine glass, she heard someone greet her. Wen Shuyi turned around and saw that it was Xie Qingying, the niece of the Prime Minister, Xie Beichen. She quickly smiled. "Miss Xie? Long time no see." The two of them used to know each other because of the He family, and they were quite familiar with each other. However, when Shuyi had left the imperial capital with He Jichu, it was said that she had gone abroad, so her relationship with Xie Qingying had been cut off. Xie Qingying nodded at her. "Miss Wen, do you know who will be hosting the dance tonight?" "I'm not sure about that. I'm also guessing." When Shuyi smiled at her. "What do you think, Miss Xie?" "I can't guess. I'll just watch the show," Xie Qingying said. Suddenly she heard the hall fall silent. She and Wen Shuyi subconsciously turned around. A man and a woman walked in from the living room door. Everyone was stunned. The man was tall and straight. He wore a fitted tuxedo and his eyes were deep and reserved. His face was exquisite and beautiful, like a meticulous painting. Every stroke was just right. He was God's proudest work. Other men standing next to him were half-finished products that God had casually thrown out of mud. The contrast was extremely tragic. When Shuyi's heart skipped a beat. Wasn't this the deputy chief consul of the Soviet Union? It was said that his name was Peter. His Chinese name was also Hua Xiaoheng, but she had heard from Qin Yaoguang that this wasn't Major General Hua from the other side. This was their counterpart, Peter Ho. The first time she saw him at a diplomatic event, she was also a little surprised. However, she had experienced more than others, so she quickly calmed down. Now that she saw him again, she could already treat him like a stranger. So when Xie Qingying asked curiously, "Who is that person? Why is he so good-looking?" When Shuyi said lightly, "I don't know. I don't know him. Do you want me to ask around for you?" No, there's no need." Xie Qingying quickly shook her head and pouted. "Look at the woman next to him. She's also a rare beauty. The woman next to Peter was Linda, who had just arrived from the Soviet Union. She was his female companion tonight. She was wearing a rose-red off-the-shoulder evening gown with a slanted front. Her entire left leg was faintly discernible from the bottom to the top. She was extremely beautiful and seductive. This man and woman attending together could really be considered the peak of beauty today. So when they entered, everyone was stunned. After a while, the living room returned to its previous state. Everyone began to brag and chat as if nothing had happened. Xia Qingying said, "Excuse me." She immediately asked someone to find out who the man and woman who had just entered were. The ace of the Far East was now the deputy chief consul of the Soviet Consulate General in Sea City. He had already participated in several diplomatic activities, and many people had seen him. Seeing that it was the Prime Minister's niece who asked, everyone gave her a general introduction. This is the deputy chief consul that the Soviet Union has sent to the Consulate General in Sea City. I heard that he's only 30 years old and is in the prime of his life. The beautiful woman next to him is his female companion. I heard that she just came from the Soviet Union to see him. The deputy chief consul Peter bent his arm and held Linda's hand as he walked in. His face was arrogant and cold. He didn't even bat an eyelid at anyone. This was today's second update, Chapter 1569, The Peak of Attractiveness. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Good night, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1581. Needless to say, the deputy chief counsel was good-looking, and his female companion was also good-looking. Moreover, they were not Caucasians. They were all Asians, but they had the same deep facial features as Caucasians. The people in the living room had interacted with the deputy chief counsel of the Soviet Union before, and they quickly surrounded them. The entire dance floor was immediately divided, and two groups of people appeared. One group was pro-American with the American ambassador as the center, and the other group was pro-Soviet with the deputy chief counsel of the Soviet Union as the center. Because the two people from the Soviet Union were much more good-looking than the American side, those neutral people also surrounded the deputy chief counsel of the Soviet Union. As a result, the crowd on the Soviet side was much larger than on the American side. Linda held a cocktail glass and smiled as she exchanged pleasantries with the people around her. Her features were picturesque and lively, and every single move she made perfectly displayed what boundless charm and alluring beauty was like, causing the nearby men to blush and their hearts to palpitate, and they were on the verge of losing control of their penises. It was a kind of sexiness that was both inside and out. When the two of them first came in, some women took a fancy to the deputy chief counsel of the Soviet Union and wanted to flirt with him. However, once Linda made a move, these women lost without a fight. With a true beauty like Linda, they didn't have the confidence that they could win the deputy chief counsel's heart. Xia Qingying and Wen Shuyi both stood near the American ambassador. It wasn't that they were pro-American, but there were too many people on the Soviet side. They were too embarrassed to squeeze with others, so they could only stand over. The American ambassador, Hunter, had never been robbed of his limelight on such occasions before. This was the first time he had been slapped in the face, and by two young Soviet diplomats. His expression was very ugly. However, today was the He family's Christmas party. He didn't have to be so shameless as to openly argue with the Soviet diplomats. He could only hold his cocktail glass and blink at the female companion brought by the Soviet diplomat with a smile. He knew very well that the greatest humiliation he could give a man on such an occasion was to seduce his female companion. He didn't expect the beautiful woman with a sweet smile to turn around and raise her glass at him. At the same time, she also raised her middle finger. The American ambassador, Hunter, was instantly furious. The deputy chief consul of the Soviet Union was the KGB's ace of the Far East, Peter Huishauhan. Although he did not directly stare at the American ambassador, he could clearly see what the ambassador had done. But he ignored him and whispered a warning to Linda in Russian. "Don't cause trouble." Linda restrained herself a little, turned to the UA ambassador, stuck out the tip of her tongue and licked her lips. The American ambassador immediately felt his body tense up and almost lost his composure. He quickly looked away, no longer looking at the beauty from the Soviet Union. If he guessed correctly, that beauty was definitely not an ordinary woman. With such skillful flirting skills, she was most likely the famous Swallow of the KGB. He was an American diplomat and could not be fooled by the Soviet Union's Swallow. However, that Swallow was really too charming. If she came to seduce him, should he beat her at her own game, or would he rather die than submit? Just as he was preparing himself mentally, The hands of the clock finally pointed to 7 o'clock sharp. The clanging of the bell resounded in the hall, striking everyone's ears with a penetrating force. Everyone quickly stopped talking. Some even held their breaths, quietly waiting for the He family's host to arrive. The 3 crystal lamps hanging from the ceiling gradually dimmed, but the hall did not become pitch black. Instead, bits of starlight shone through the tulle curtains. Of course, how could there be such bright natural starlight at the end of December in the imperial capital? These were all artificial starlight outside the hall, shining in through the special curtain material. In the half-light and half-darkness, the huge mural arch on the north side quietly opened to both sides. A ray of light shone out from the door. A tall and handsome man pushed a wheelchair and slowly walked out of the soft light. The faint sound of Christmas music followed, and the air was filled with a cheerful festive atmosphere. Everyone's mood relaxed and they couldn't help but smile. Then the 3 crystal lamps on the ceiling lit up one after another. The outline of the hall was revealed bit by bit under the light. At this moment, everyone clearly saw the handsome man who walked out of the mural arch and the beautiful woman in the wheelchair he was pushing. This man was He Jichu, the only son of He Qingjian, the head of the He family. He was also wearing a custom-made black tuxedo. There was no small bow tie under his neck, and his white shirt was slightly open at the collar. He looked elegant and unruly. He didn't look at the guests in the hall. Instead, he lowered his eyes and focused on the young girl sitting in the wheelchair. He bent down to put a thin ash-gray blanket on her knees. The young girl was wearing a simple but well-cut black dress. Her shoulder-length hair was draped over her shoulders. She didn't have any other jewelry on her body, only a pink diamond crown on her head. The crystal lights in the living room were completely lit up. The pink diamond crown on the young girl's head emitted a colorful rainbow under the soft crystal lights, like a curved rainbow rising behind her. The sound of gasps rose and fell in the hall, and some people even exclaimed in surprise. Everyone was a knowledgeable person. At a glance, they could tell that the pink diamond crown was not only valuable, but it was also priceless. It was an antique, a cultural relic, but it was casually worn on the young girl's head as if it was an ordinary hairband. Looking at the young girl's appearance, her face was pale and bloodless. Her lips were a faint red, like a cherry blossom petal that had fallen into the water and revealed a little bit of red. There was a transparent nasal oxygen tube inserted into her nose. It was obvious that she had just recovered from a serious illness. However, she blinked slightly, and her big eyes seemed to have light in them. She glanced at the hall indifferently, and her gaze was even more charming than that of the Soviet beauty just now. However, she didn't seem to know how seductive she was. Her eyes were calm and refreshing. It was even more intoxicating than a straightforward desire. This young girl was, of course, Gunyenji. She wore the pink diamond crown that He Jichu had specially taken out, and her emotions were mixed. In the other world there was also an identical pink diamond crown. It was a 1-year-old birthday present that Gu Xiangwen had bought for his daughter, Gunyenji. But in this world, this pink diamond crown was a betrothal gift from the He family. No wonder He Jichu had such an expression when he saw the pink diamond crown. He Jichu glanced at Gunyenji again. Seeing that she wasn't feeling any discomfort, he looked up at the crowd in the hall and said with a faint smile, "Welcome to the He family's Christmas party. Long time no see. How is everyone?" His voice spread through the Bluetooth headset's amplifier to the entire audience. It was clear, natural, and powerful. "Young Master He, long time no see. Young Master He, you look so radiant today. Young Master He, is the happy occasion approaching?" Some of He Jichu's friends rushed over and stood 2 meters away from them. They smiled and waved in greeting. They weren't familiar with the grown-up Gunyenji, but they all recognized the pink diamond crown on her head. They had all attended the He family's grand engagement party. Although they had teased He Jichu for raising a little child bride, at that time, when the He family took out the historic pink diamond crown, no one said anything like that again. This priceless pink diamond crown already represented the He family's greatest sincerity. No matter how picky they were, they couldn't say anything bad about it. Not far away, Qin Yaoguang, who was standing next to Old Master Qin, trembled and almost froze. She stared at Gunyenji, who was smiling silently in the wheelchair. She could hardly believe her eyes. Although this girl was pale and weak, and although she was still connected to a transparent nasal oxygen tube, there was no doubt that she had recovered and her life was no longer in danger. How did Gunyenji survive without the best cardiac surgeon to perform the surgery? Didn't they say that she had been unconscious when she came? She had thought that she was already at the end of her tether and was about to die. Could it be that her physique was really so strong that she could even heal such a serious gunshot wound on her own? The doctors and nurses at West Camp Hospital in H-City all said that young master he had hired a very skilled doctor to perform a very successful surgery on the seriously injured patient. However, Qin Yaoguang still didn't believe that the doctor was so capable that he could snatch Gu Nianji back from the Grim Reaper. So now that she saw Gu Nianji alive and well, Qin Yaoguang only had one explanation, and that was that Gu Nianji's own physique had developed to a new level in the past 14 years that she didn't know about. No, it should be said that it had evolved to a new level. Qin Yaoguang's eyes burned with passion. She clenched her fists and thought that this time, nothing could stop her plan. Her eyes suddenly turned red. She staggered through the crowd and pounced on He Jichu and Gu Nianji. She started to cry as she sobbed and said loudly, "Nianji? Nianji? Is that you? My daughter. I thought your gunshot wound wouldn't heal. Who could survive an anti-material sniper rifle? You're a miracle. You're the greatest miracle in my life." This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1570, You're the Greatest Miracle in My Life. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. There was one more update at 8 p.m. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1582. She had actually pounced on her so quickly. It was half an hour earlier than she had expected. Qin Yaoguang didn't seem like someone who couldn't keep her cool, so how anxious was she? Gu Nianji sighed in her heart and slowly raised her head. Her smile and silent expression instantly became sharp, like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed, or a treasured knife that had just been sharpened. The 3-foot-long edge suddenly grew, as if a cold light was shooting out of her jade-like eyes. She didn't say a word. She only raised her eyes and made Qin Yaoguang, who had just pounced on her, stop in her tracks. But very quickly her gaze softened, and the cold and murderous aura from before disappeared without a trace. When she completely raised her head, her face had already appropriately revealed a confused expression. There was also a trace of fear and terror that naturally appeared on her palm-sized face. It made people unable to help but feel pity for her. Gu Nianji shrunk into the back of her wheelchair and whispered, "Young Master He, who is she?" Her voice was very weak and seemed to be out of breath, but it was also clearly transmitted throughout the hall through the Bluetooth headset she was wearing. With just this one sentence he had changed the main point of the conversation. Qin Yaoguang's question, "Who else can survive under the assault of an anti-material rifle?" was almost completely forgotten by everyone. Everyone's attention instantly shifted to the relationship between the mother and daughter. At least a third of the people in the hall knew that Gu Nianji was He Jichu's fiancée. They also knew that she was Qin Yaoguang's daughter. They also knew that she had suddenly disappeared at the birthday party 8 years ago. 8 years later, He Jichu had finally found her. But when she opened her mouth, she didn't seem to know Qin Yaoguang at all. Not only was Qin Yaoguang stunned, but everyone in the hall was also stunned. Only He Jichu's expression was calm. He looked down at Gu Nianji and said calmly, "Haven't you remembered yet?" Gu Nianji shook her head and furrowed her beautiful brows. She sized up Qin Yaoguang, who was standing below the stage, and said politely, "Hello, may I ask who you are? Have you mistaken me for someone else?" Qin Yaoguang narrowed her eyes and wondered what Gu Nianji was up to. She clearly knew that she was her biological mother. Did she still want to deny her biological mother? Qin Yaoguang's expression turned cold. She had all the evidence to prove that she was her biological mother, yet she still wanted to deny it? No matter how much He Jichu hated her, he couldn't deny this. Qin Yaoguang's eyes flashed and she said seriously, "Nianji, do you really not remember me? Sai, it seems like your injury is really serious. I told you not to find a random doctor to operate on you. Look at the sequelae." Gu Nianji felt very uncomfortable when she heard that. Where did this pheasant come from? How dare he talk about others? She rudely interrupted her and said in a low voice, "Please don't insult other people's profession. May I ask what your occupation is, madam? Why did you call the doctor who saved me a fake doctor?" He Jichu put his hands in the pockets of his tuxedo and stood leisurely to the side. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes shone with a charming light. He raised his chin with interest. "She's also a doctor. She's the director of the Qin Corporation's private hospital group, a brain surgeon expert, Qin Yaoguang." "So it's Dean Qin." Gu Nianji's tone softened and she smiled slightly. "I see. I'll take it that you're in the same line of work. It's understandable, but you're openly calling someone a fake doctor. That's too much. That's too vulgar. Qin Yaoguang blushed a little, but she still said righteously, I'm just that straightforward. I don't beat around the bush. Oh, so that's really an earthworm that has become a spirit. Gun Yanji laughed. Din Qin, you're so funny. The people in the hall couldn't help laughing. The tense atmosphere from before instantly collapsed. Qin Yaoguang was annoyed by her words, but these words that she hated so much also made her realize that Gun Yanji was pretending to be stupid, pretending to have amnesia. It seemed like she really wanted to get rid of her biological mother. Qin Yaoguang felt even more pressured. If Gun Yanji used the He family's power and insisted on drawing a clear line with her, what could she do? Then there was really nothing she could do. But what about her plans, her research, and the results of her research? And what about her lifelong happiness and her last chance to win back He Qingjian? Qin Yaoguang regretted being so harsh on her. She might as well be a loving mother first. Perhaps it would be more possible. But now that things had come to this, it was too late to regret it. Besides, she really didn't have any mother-daughter feelings for her, so why pretend to be kind? Qin Yaoguang clenched her fists and tried her best to control herself. She suppressed the anger in her heart and said kindly, Child, you used to tease your mommy like this and you said it again today. Forget it, I won't lower myself to your level, but are your injuries really okay? I heard that it was an anti-material rifle that can penetrate armor. If it hits a person, even an Iron Man would be torn to pieces. Gun Yanji cursed Qin Yaoguang in her heart for being both vicious and stupid. She was courting death by saying that she was injured in public. She continued to be confused. Din Qin, may I ask what you're talking about? What anti-material rifle? I don't understand. She tilted her head to look at He Jichu beside her and asked with a puzzled expression, Young Master He, wasn't I cut with a knife? Why did Din Qin insist that it was an anti-material rifle? He Jichu nodded and said with a faint smile, I'm also very curious. Nianji was cut by a criminal more than a month ago and was hospitalized for more than a month. She was just able to sit up. Din Qin suddenly said that she was hit by an anti-material rifle. TSK, do you know what an anti-material rifle is? Qin Yaoguang's heart sank completely. He Jichu was going to collude with Gun Yanji and lie in public? She clearly remembered He Qingjian telling her that Gun Yanji had been hit by an anti-material rifle and needed to find a good cardiac surgeon to perform the surgery. How did it become cut by a knife, after more than a month? There were so many high-ranking people in the hall looking at her with interest. Qin Yaoguang's back straightened even more. She couldn't stand being publicly slandered like this and questioning her professional ethics. However, He Qingjian was the one who had told her about this. She definitely couldn't drag He Qingjian into this. She cursed Gun Yanji in her heart for being cunning and despicable. With a cold face she said vaguely, Of course I know. That's why I was surprised. I wanted to know how she was cured. She clearly had to die, but young master He denied it with her. I don't know what to say. Do I have to tell you who told me personally? Tell me who told you personally. Gun Yanji calmly led her. That operation was a military secret. Qin Yaoguang shouldn't have known that Qin Jining was a sniper at all. Gun Yanji wanted to see how vicious and stupid Qin Yaoguang could be to reveal the military's military secret in public. Qin Yaoguang realized that Gun Yanji was provoking her. The name, He Qingjian, lingered in her mouth a few times, and the muscles on her face twitched. In the end, her rationality prevailed over her emotions. She glared at Gun Yanji and said through gritted teeth, Right? Then I remembered wrongly. So it wasn't an anti-material rifle. It was a knife wound. Gun Yanji chuckled and tilted her head. She said playfully, Huh? Din Qin seemed to be very disappointed. Could it be that in Din Qin's heart he wanted me to be hit by an anti-material rifle instead of a knife wound? I can assure you that it's really painful to be cut by a knife. My back is so injured that I can't even see anyone. She grimaced again and smiled. I remember that Din Qin just said that I'm your daughter and the greatest miracle in your life. TSK, do you really want the greatest miracle in your life to die an unnatural death? Gun Yanji's voice was gentle and melodious. The high-definition sound of the Bluetooth headset reverberated in the hall, and it was exceptionally clear. It made Qin Yaoguang's facial muscles twitch. Her expression was ferocious and she was on the verge of exploding. Everyone in the hall recalled Qin Yaoguang's sobbing motherly call, and couldn't help exchanging a tacit look. Without waiting for Qin Yaoguang to react, Gun Yanji said calmly, However, if you insist that I'm your daughter, then so be it. Anyway, I was sent to the He family from the age of 6 until I'm 20 years old. In the past 14 years as a mother, you haven't done your duty as a mother for a single day. Even if I didn't lose my memory, it would be normal for me not to remember you. When Shui saw that the situation was not looking good, so she quickly stepped forward to support Qin Yaoguang, who was on the verge of collapse. She smiled gently and said, "Nianji, don't say that. Auntie Qin sent you to the He family for your own good. Otherwise, how could you have gotten engaged to young Master He? Right? Besides, there are all kinds of parents in the world. No matter what, Auntie Qin is your biological mother. Now that you've grown up, you've forgotten who gave birth to you. That's not good. You can't be unfilial." Gu Nianji coughed lightly. She clutched her chest and lowered her head. She said awkwardly, "Can you two speak in unison before you speak? You want me to be filial to her and she wants me to die for her to see. So you mean that in order to be filial to her, I have to die for her to see? Otherwise I'm unfilial? Is that what you mean? Why do you want me to die? Is it for her? If you want her to be your mother, you can take it. I don't need it. I really don't remember." Gu Nianji rubbed her head and was about to cry. When Shui looked at Gu Nianji with a livid expression, she knew that this woman was good at pretending to be innocent and distorting the truth because of her young age. She looked at He Jichu and opened her mouth. She really wanted to expose Gu Nianji's hypocrisy and viciousness. He Jichu didn't even look at her. He bent down to comfort Gu Nianji. He Jichu patted her on the shoulder and straightened up. He nodded to everyone in the hall. "Sorry for the embarrassment. I wanted to take this opportunity to announce something to everyone today." He looked at Gu Nianji with an infinitely affectionate gaze, but his voice was cold and clear. Every word seemed to be dug out from the bottom of his heart with a knife. "From today onwards, Gu Nianji is my sister. Whoever bullies her is bullying me, He Jichu and the He family." This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1571, Countering Every Move. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. Looking at the monthly votes, it was very likely that there would be a third update tomorrow. Good night, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1583. Everyone in the hall was silent for a few minutes, then there was an uproar. It was like a drop of ice water falling into a hot pan of oil. The oil splashed everywhere. Everyone was stunned by He Jichu's words. Wasn't Gu Nianji his fiancée? Look at the pink diamond crown on her head that symbolized the betrothal gift. That was a pink diamond crown of great historical significance. It had once been a betrothal gift from Empress Catherine of Tsarist Russia's mother-in-law. Yes, Catherine had once been the Empress of Tsarist Russia. She had staged a coup and deposed her husband, Peter III, then ascended the throne herself. He Jichu's gaze also fell on the pink diamond crown on Gu Nianji's head. He smiled and continued, "This pink diamond crown is the proof of us siblings. Nianji, are you willing to call me brother?" Although Gu Nianji had already known that He Jichu was planning to do this, when he actually said it in front of so many people, her eyes couldn't help turning red. She knew that he was doing this to force himself not to go back on his word. Gu Nianji quickly nodded and looked up with admiration. "Brother, I've always hoped that you would be my brother. Today my dream has finally come true." He Qingjian, who was standing in a room on the second floor and watching the commotion in the hall, instantly blushed. What the hell were these two doing? Achu had actually given up on Gu Nianji? He Qingjian was so angry in the room that he paced around, but he had a trace of rationality. He didn't go down and ask the two of them for an explanation. They were all at his house anyway. If they didn't explain things clearly tonight, he wouldn't let them out of the house. He stared at the hall on the first floor from the one-sided window. At that moment he heard the music in the hall and the party began. Last Christmas I gave you me heart. But the very next day you gave it away. This year Tosavima from Terzil Givitis Omiona special. Merry Christmas. Irrepetitapan sent it with an oda saying, I love you, imiantit. Now ik no wada faliva bean beautify kasedmano ik no you'd full megan. Last Christmas I gave you my heart. You toss it aside the next day. This year I will not cry, I will give my heart to others. This year I saw you again and gave you another note saying, I love you. I truly love you. Now I know that I'm willing to be deceived by you. Please give me a chance to be deceived by you. It's an old song, last. Although it was a Christmas song, it was a love song that could not be obtained. He Qingjian's gaze gradually deepened. He watched He Jichu extend his hand to Gu Nianji, who was in the wheelchair. Gu Nianji smiled and held his hand as he led her around the center of the hall. The wheelchair she was in was extraordinarily flexible. Ijichu turned off their Bluetooth headsets. His tall and handsome figure circled around her wheelchair and danced with her. Forward, backward, his left leg stepped forward and his right leg bent. Soon he caught up with his front leg. Gunyenji's wheelchair flew up from his spinning. For a moment he switched it to her left hand and for a moment he switched it to her right hand. It was like dancing with a little robot. Gunyenji was finally happy. Her crisp and soft laughter echoed in the hall. It was in time with the music and even the sad Christmas dance music became lively. Hijichu curled his lips and gestured to the people around the hall, indicating that everyone could dance. Soon, couples slid into the center of the dance floor and began to dance. They all politely left the center of the dance floor to Gunyenji and Hijichu. After all, Gunyenji was in a wheelchair so she needed more space. But not long after, a pair of extremely good-looking male and female dance partners jumped over. It was the Deputy Chief Consul of the Soviet Union, the ace of the Far East, Peter, and his dance partner Linda. The beautiful Linda's dancing skills were outstanding, but Peter was actually on par with her. The two of them spun and danced, their coordination perfect. But just as they were about to jump to Hijichu and Gunyenji's side, Linda suddenly patted Hijichu on the shoulder. Hijichu subconsciously turned around. Linda had already pulled his hand around her waist with one hand and held his other hand with the other. Her move wasn't simple. It wasn't a ballroom dance move at all. It was a small grappling technique. Hijichu didn't notice it and was actually successfully disrupted by her. He jumped away with her. The ace of the Far East took the opportunity to snatch Gunyenji's wheelchair from him. Gunyenji instantly found herself in a frenzy of spinning. In Hijichu's hands they danced harmoniously and happily. But in the hands of the ace of the Far East, they danced crazily and excitedly. In the end, Gunyenji was even picked up from the wheelchair by the ace of the Far East. She leaned against his arms and stood on his feet. He held her waist with one hand and held her hand with the other. They danced the tango to the fast-paced Christmas dance music in the ballroom. Because she couldn't walk on her own, Gunyenji's entire weight was in the hands of the ace of the Far East. He carried her and walked like a cat. When he was slow, he was steady and unhurried. When he was fast, he was passionate. He pushed and pulled, looked left and right, looked back every 3 steps, bent his waist every 5 steps and moved forward and backward. She could feel the heat rising from his chest on her back. His arms were strong and powerful. He lifted her up and circled her in a small circle almost effortlessly. Gunyenji turned around in surprise several times, only to see his handsome face with a faint smile. From time to time he would want to lean over and kiss her cheek. Gunyenji dodged and looked around the ballroom as if she was asking for help. Hijichu finally got rid of Linda and strode over to carry Gunyenji from the ace of the Far East's arms. Gunyenji felt her violently beating heart calm down as she leaned against Hijichu's arms. She gripped Hijichu's sleeve tightly and glared at the flamboyant ace of the Far East. Hijichu didn't say a word. He put her back in the wheelchair and pushed her out of the ballroom to the small living room for everyone to rest. The ace of the Far East also followed him. He shrugged and said disapprovingly, "Young master, is this how you treat your guests?" Hijichu looked Gunyenji up and down. He saw that her clothes were neat and tidy, and her hair was a little wet with sweat. Her eyes seemed to be brimming with light. She wasn't at a disadvantage. He stared at her and said gently, "Are you tired? Do you want me to send you back to rest?" Gunyenji nodded. "I'm thirsty. Give me a bottle of water." Hijichu waved for the waiter to come over and give her a glass of fresh milk. Gunyenji frowned but didn't say anything. She silently drank a few mouthfuls of fresh milk. The ace of the Far East watched with interest and said, "Young master, I heard from those people that the pink diamond crown on Lawyer Gu's head was your family's betrothal gift? Why don't you want Lawyer Gu to be your fiancée? Isn't she good?" Hijichu straightened up and looked at him calmly. He said, "I don't think being an engaged couple is as good as being brother and sister." The ace of the Far East rubbed his nose and said awkwardly, "I've never heard of such a thing. Husband and wife are the closest. Brother and sister are too unreliable." "How could that be?" Hijichu replied calmly. "Husband and wife can still divorce, but brother and sister." He lowered his head and covered Gunyenji with the thin, smoky gray blanket. "We'll always be brother and sister. We'll never be separated." The ace of the Far East stopped smiling and snorted. "I'll admire you if you can still say that when your sister gets married." As he spoke, he walked to Gunyenji's side and bowed to her in a Western style. "Beautiful Lawyer Gu, may I have a dance with you?" "No. Gu Nianji rejected him without hesitation. Gu Nianji rejected him without hesitation. I saw that you have a partner, Mr. Peter. You can't be fickle and fickle. She didn't hesitate to throw back what the ace of the Far East had said to her. Hijichu laughed out loud and his almond-shaped eyes rippled with laughter. Mr. Peter, the most important thing to do is to keep your word. You brought a partner, so how can you leave her alone? The few of them looked into the ballroom and looked away at the same time. Ms. Linda was like a fish in water. She was the brightest star in the ballroom. She was dancing with the American ambassador, Hunter, and couldn't be separated. The ace of the Far East sat down on the sofa next to Gu Nianji's wheelchair. He looked up at her legs and said, "Don't come out to such an occasion before you recover. There are too many people and it's hard to control. If you bump into something." Hijichu didn't wait for him to finish and interrupted him with a dark expression. "Mr. Peter, you're being too nosy. In my territory, it won't be hard to control no matter how many people there are." "Really?" The ace of the Far East sked and slapped him in the face professionally. "I've asked around about Lawyer Gu. She disappeared from your house 8 years ago, right? I heard it was at her 12th birthday party?" Hijichu's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. "That was just an accident. And I won't make such a mistake again." "But why do you have to give others a chance to make a mistake?" The ace of the Far East was aggressive and had no intention of giving up on the topic. "The best defense is not to give the other party a chance to take advantage of it. Don't you understand that?" Gu Nianji saw Hijichu's expression change drastically. She quickly pulled his hand and said calmly to the ace of the Far East, "Mr. Peter, we can't give up eating for fear of choking. We can't hide in the room forever just because something might go wrong, can we? Besides, I believe that the best defense is offense. So I won't hide and not see anyone." This ace of the Far East had Major General Hua's face in vain. In fact, his way of doing things was completely different. Gu Nianji sighed in her heart and lost interest in continuing to talk to him. The ace of the Far East shook his head and said casually, "But this kind of attack should be carried out with thorough preparation. Otherwise, looking at your current state, I have hundreds of ways to take your life silently. Do you think you have the confidence to avoid it?" "Gu Nianji," she rolled her eyes in annoyance. "If you wanted to take my life, do you believe that you wouldn't be able to get close to me?" The ace of the Far East raised an eyebrow. Not long after, there were more people in the small living room who had come to rest. The Prime Minister's niece, Xie Qingying, was one of them. She walked over gracefully and nodded at Hijichu. "Young Master He, long time no see." Hijichu nodded and smiled at her. He said politely, "Miss Xie has become even more beautiful." Xie Qingying smiled and said, "I just saw Miss Wan and Dean Qing go out. I think they left." Hijichu's eyes flashed and his attitude became even more amiable. "Miss Xie has a good relationship with Wan Shui and Dean Qing? I did have a good relationship with Miss Wan a few years ago. Later she went abroad and we didn't have any contact for a while. We're still a little unfamiliar when we meet again today." Hijichu exchanged a few pleasantries with her. Xie Qingying was invited out to dance again. He took out his phone and checked the surveillance cameras at the entrance. He saw when Shuyi and Qin Yaoguang get into the Qin family's car and leave. Gu Nianji thought about what the ace of the Far East had just said and looked at Hijichu thoughtfully. She suddenly asked, "Young Master He, how did I disappear 8 years ago? Can you tell me again?" This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1572, I'll Give You My Heart. A reminder to everyone about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. The monthly votes were already 4,000. There were monthly votes and updates today, so there were 3 updates today. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the monthly votes were 4,000 plus updates. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the 3rd update. P.S. Thank you to Love at Morning for your 10,000 Chidian coins. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1584. Hijichu frowned slightly. "Why did you suddenly think of asking this?" He glared at the ace of the Far East unkindly. He had just been slapped in the face by him, saying that he couldn't even protect Nianji in his own home, but could he blame them for not being prepared? As long as that lunatic Gu Xiangwen made a move, all of them together wouldn't be his match. Gu Nianji tugged at the corner of his shirt and said softly, "Young Master He, tell me. I don't even remember and I'm also very curious. Really, you guys are so protective of me. To be honest, I can't figure out how I could get lost right under your nose." She looked curious because she had heard from Lu Jin that he had taken her away that time because he had intercepted her. Hijichu definitely didn't know about the tortuous experience. He looked at Gun Yinji's pleading face and couldn't steel his heart against her. However, when he saw that the ace of the Far East was also eyeing him covetously, his heart skipped a beat. He pushed Gun Yinji's wheelchair and said, "I'll take you back. I'll tell you what happened." Gun Yinji nodded repeatedly. Okay, let's go back now." Hijichu pushed Gun Yinji's wheelchair towards the elevator. Although their mansion wasn't a high-rise building, it also had an elevator that led to the top. However, it was only used for temporary purposes, and most people didn't take the elevator. However, Gun Yinji needed to sit in a wheelchair, so she needed to take the elevator up and down. They entered the elevator and didn't expect the ace of the Far East to follow them. "I'm sorry, please stop." Hijichu pointed at the sign next to the elevator. The ace of the Far East looked at Gun Yinji and said coldly, "Don't forget what I do. With me here, I can help you find out the truth." Hijichu hated seeing the ace of the Far East act like he was the best in the world. He shook his head expressionlessly. "No need, this is a family matter. Please go back." Gun Yinji didn't want outsiders to know about her childhood. She smiled at the ace of the Far East and said alienatedly, "You're very kind, but there's no need. I believe we can find out the truth ourselves. You should go take care of your female companion. She's been attracting too much attention today. I'm afraid she's already offended half of the female guests." Ace of the Far East. Hijichu felt very comfortable when he heard Gun Yinji say, "we," and insult the ace of the Far East. His sparkling almond-shaped eyes were filled with warmth. He smiled at the ace of the Far East and closed the elevator in front of him. The ace of the Far East rubbed his nose and had no choice but to turn around and return to the ballroom. Gun Yinji and Hijichu's elevator stopped on the second floor. He pushed her back to her room. There were still many soldiers standing guard in the corridor. The security was tight, and the security was much better than Gun Yinji's treatment in the other world. Hijichu closed the door and Gun Yinji finally stood up from the wheelchair. She stretched and giggled. "Oh, it's not that easy to pretend to be paralyzed. My legs are all numb." She did a few yoga bends. Her soft waist was like a willow twig, as if she could break it with her hands. Hijichu's chest heated up. He quickly turned his head away and pushed her wheelchair to the corner of the wall. Gun Yinji exercised for a while before going to the bathroom to wash her face. She washed off the makeup on her face bit by bit. As she put on a facial mask, she sat down on the sofa and said, "Now tell me, how exactly did you lose me at home 8 years ago?" Hijichu's expression was very ugly. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Wait a moment. I'll go get my computer." Gun Yinji nodded and leaned back on the sofa. As she dried her facial mask, she took out her phone to scroll through Weibo. Her Weibo account wasn't on this side, so she casually registered a few alternate accounts to play slowly. Hijichu returned to his room and found his laptop. He opened it and looked at the things stored on it. Fortunately, after 8 years it was still inside. No one had touched his things. At that moment, someone pushed the door open and walked in. Hijichu looked up and saw He Qingjian with a dark expression. He quickly walked to his desk. "Achu, what the hell are you doing?" He Qingjian slammed the table and questioned him. "Didn't you risk your life to look for her? You were willing to give up the entire He family for her. Why did you suddenly want her to be your sister?" Hijichu's expression didn't change and his cold voice was emotionless. "I feel a little tired. She's too young. Maybe I always give in to her. As time goes by, it's easy to have friction." He Qingjian also knew that Gun Yinji had always rejected Hijichu. He had thought that Hijichu would be as unyielding as he was back then, until he finally won the heart of the woman he loved. "You're letting go just like that?" He Qingjian looked at him suspiciously. "You didn't do this on purpose to keep me out of it, did you?" "Of course not." Hijichu put away his laptop and naturally changed the topic. "By the way, Yinji's injury hasn't healed yet. I'm going to accompany her. You can go downstairs and host the ball. How can you do without a host?" He Qingjian snorted. "I'll deal with it. Think about it carefully. What do you want? Yinji is a good girl. You can't let her down." The corners of Hijichu's mouth couldn't help twitching. He didn't want to let her down, but she had to give him a chance not to let her down. Hijichu walked to the door and said aloofly, "It's better for a relationship to be consensual. Don't worry, maybe I'll find a girl who loves me soon, and then you'll be able to hold your grandchildren soon." Really? "Will I live long enough to see my grandchildren?" Even though He Qingjian was a cunning old fox, he was still led astray by the words, grandchildren. He practically floated back to the ballroom on the first floor with a grin on his face. He greeted every guest with a smile, which made everyone feel flattered and even more flattered. Both the guests and the host were extremely satisfied. That night, the He family's Christmas party was an unprecedented success. Other than the opening episode of mother and daughter failing to recognize each other and being attacked, everything was perfect. General He was in a surprisingly good mood that night. He only appeared in the second half of the party, but his attitude towards people was amiable. Everyone felt as if they were bathing in the spring breeze and felt his unparalleled charisma. Ever since his wife passed away, it could be said that he hadn't been so patient in many years. Gunyanji and He Jichu, who were upstairs, didn't care about the noise downstairs at all. The two of them sat side by side on the sofa. He Jichu said, "You should have seen part of it last time. I'll show you the complete video now." He pressed the play button. Soon it was like watching a 3D movie. Gunyanji found that they were back in the living room on the first floor. However, this was a birthday party, not the resplendent Christmas party that night. The crystal lamps glowed with a sparkling light. The guests were full of guests, dressed in fragrant clothes and laughing happily. The living room was decorated in a childlike manner. There were large strings of hydrogen balloons tied to the tall pillars. They were painted with the words, "Happy Birthday Nyenji." All kinds of gold foil garlands hung from the crystal chandelier, and many colorful flowers decorated the entire hall. Animal dolls of all sizes were placed around the living room, and there were circus troupes and clowns performing. There were also servants in white shirts and black pants shuttling through the living room to entertain the guests. There were many flowers and bonsai plants arranged in the living room, and there were people taking care of them. Many of the guests were children about the same age as the 12-year-old Gunyenji. They were all wearing cartoon uniforms and playing around in the living room. It was extremely lively. Some were wearing cloaks and dressed as vampire counts, while others were wearing maid costumes and dressed as Cinderella. There were also people wearing masks and dressed as little Spider-Man. There were also people dressed as Mickey Mouse, Minions, Tigger, and even little beauties dressed as Mulan in ancient costumes. However, some of the cartoon costumes looked luxurious and exquisite and were worth a lot of money. Some were obviously bought online for more than 10 yuan, and the workmanship was rough. Little Nyenji, who was only 12 years old, didn't wear a cartoon uniform. Instead, she wore a normal puffy skirt and a pink diamond crown on her head. From their clothes, it could be seen that these children came from different families. Gunyenji asked curiously, "These children are all my friends?" Ijichu smiled. "A few of them are your friends and most of them are here to make up the numbers. Some of them are the children of the He family's servants. They were specially invited to serve as guests to create the birthday atmosphere." Gunyenji, "No way?" Gunyenji didn't believe it. Although she didn't remember what happened back then, she didn't think she was such a snobbish person. Hijichu stroked her shoulder-length hair and said proudly, "What's so strange about that? It's very difficult for people of different social classes to really be friends. Although you were young at the time, you were extremely smart and very sensitive. You know very well whether others approve of you from the bottom of their hearts or treat you well on the surface." At the time, Gunyenji would follow behind him after school and ramble on about what had happened in school. She would announce, "I don't like him because he's actually trying to please brother He and uncle He. He doesn't really want to be friends with me." She would also say, "I like him. Even though his family is average, if she buys 2 ice creams she'll share one with me. It's too hypocritical to give me all of them, and it's too distant if she doesn't give me any. One for each of us is just right." At that time he would also carefully analyze the friends she had met at school and teach her to recognize what was true and what was fake. If she hadn't disappeared and lost her memory, would they have naturally developed into a relationship? Hijichu rested his chin on one hand, his eyes dim. There were no ifs. What happened was what happened. Gunyenji wrinkled her little nose and smiled. "I didn't know I was so talkative." Hijichu's gaze shifted to the virtual projection video in the open space of the living room. He said, "Look, at such a birthday party, every guest has gone through a detailed background check. Even 3 generations of their ancestors are innocent before they are worthy of celebrating your birthday. There are also a lot of security personnel and orderlies here. The entire mansion is surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water can leak through." Hijichu paused and said self-deprecatingly, "But such strict security can't stop someone who is too powerful. As long as he makes a move, all of us combined won't be a match for him." At that moment, the virtual projection video in front of them happened to play the part of turning off the lights and blowing out the candles. It went dark for 7 seconds. When the lights came back on, Hijichu stood alone next to the cake and Gunyenji, who was beside him, had disappeared. A pink diamond crown had fallen to the ground, emitting a dazzling rainbow-shaped halo under the crystal lights. This is the second monthly vote of the day, sent to you with 4,000 plus updates. Chapter 1573, Complete Video. A reminder for everyone's monthly votes and recommendation votes. 8 o'clock in the evening. P.S. If you are reading the novel on Chidian, please click on the author's words at the end of the chapter, and you can join the fan club of the story of Cambrian. Actually, I don't know what this team is for, but clicking on it won't get me pregnant. Dear friends, please be gentler with your hands, ha ha ha. Moi moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1585. Last time, Qingjin had shown her the video of Gunyenji disappearing after turning off the lights and blowing out the candles. This was the first time she had seen it today. Then, the virtual projection video in front of her became chaotic. In the projection video, Hijichu shouted, "No one move." He pulled out his gun and raised it. He looked at the people in the living room sinisterly. "Seal the door. No one is allowed to move." There were at least 200 people in the living room, and more than half of them were children around the age of 11 or 12. As soon as they saw Hijichu pull out his gun, some of the children started crying uncontrollably. The parents tried to coax their children in low voices, but more and more children were crying. Hijichu's gaze scanned the hall, but he couldn't see where the familiar little girl had gone. Only 7 seconds. 7 seconds. He waved for his personal secretary and asked them to show him the surveillance footage of the living room. However, his personal secretary quickly ran back and said with a defeated expression, "Young Master the surveillance footage has been hacked. The footage is still from before the candles were blown out." In the virtual projection, Hijichu looked down at the surveillance footage on his phone and didn't move. Hijichu, who was sitting next to Gunyenji, explained to her, "I was looking at the surveillance footage on my phone at the time, because the footage did stop before the candles were blown out." Gunyenji was a little confused. She pointed at the virtual projection in front of her. "What about these? Didn't you film them?" Hijichu smiled wryly and said, "This video was left behind by the storage unit in my room. I used this storage unit as a backup, and the surveillance cameras in the mansion would send the surveillance footage to this storage unit in my room at regular intervals. The other party wasn't able to break my password, so this video was left behind. The surveillance cameras in the rest of the mansion were all destroyed. You have to know that the surveillance cameras in our house are very tight, and the security procedures are very difficult to break. So we suspect." "You suspect that my father did it, don't you?" Gunyenji nodded in understanding. "Other than Gu Xiangwen, there was probably no one else who could do this." Gunyenji shrunk her neck guiltily. Because Lu Jin, or Gu Xiangwen, was currently hacking into the He family's surveillance security program at her request. When she went back, she had to ask Lu Jin if he could break the password to the memory in Hijichu's room. "At first, we only suspected it, but not long after we no longer suspected it." Hijichu gestured for Gunyenji to continue watching. In the virtual projection, the living room continued to be in a mess. The faces of the adults and children were filled with fear and unease. After all, the He family's well-protected little princess had disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. They were all very scared and afraid that Hijichu would vent his anger on them. Just as Hijichu walked down the steps and was about to interrogate the adults and children present one by one, an orderly came in from outside the house and said blankly, "Young Master someone gave you a note." Hijichu. He looked at the orderly suspiciously. He didn't take the note. Instead, he looked at the orderly's hand. There was a handwritten handwriting on it. "You don't have to look anymore. I've taken my daughter away." It was signed by Gu Xiangwen. Hijichu's heart skipped a beat. He felt like he was suddenly enlightened. Everything that he couldn't figure out had been solved. That's right. Apart from Gu Xiangwen, who else could be so extravagant as to steal a 12-year-old girl in front of everyone within 7 seconds? Hijichu looked at the orderly again and felt that there was something wrong with his gaze. He glanced at him indifferently and suddenly pushed him. The orderly didn't seem to have much strength and was pushed to the ground. Then he looked around as if he had just woken up from a dream. He rubbed the back of his head and stood up. He said in confusion, "Why am I here?" Hijichu understood and his face darkened. You were hypnotized. Hypnotized? I don't remember. The orderly couldn't remember what had just happened. At that moment, a young girl ran in and said anxiously, I just came back from school and saw someone take a little girl away in a car at the corner in front of the door. Gu Nianji perked up. This person was Wen Shui. To be precise, this person should be Wen Shui, who had just turned 18 8 years ago. Her face was even rounder than it was now. She had long eyebrows, thin eyes and fair skin. She looked a little similar to the chubby Gu Nianji when she was young, but she looked more similar to the doll she had brought to the other world. All the clues pointed to Gu Xiangwen. Gu Xiangwen himself was an expert hypnotist. Hijichu knew a thing or two about the Gu family's ancestral hypnosis. Therefore, he no longer had any doubts and immediately waved his hand. Follow me. Go out and chase after the car. The virtual projection video ended here. Hijichu was the one who told her what happened after that. Our He family was heavily guarded. Only someone who was very good at hypnosis would be able to take a living person away from our house. All the evidence pointed to that person. I rushed over with my men, but I only saw the shadow of the car. So I started a large-scale search in the city. I immediately sealed off all the land transportation routes and stopped all the flights and ferries. I had to make sure that person couldn't escape. But I didn't expect that a month later, our big hunt didn't make that person surrender. Instead, it made him even crazier. That day, in a certain downtown area of Sea City, the man set his own car on fire in front of us, who were chasing after him. And in the car, I clearly saw you sitting inside. The fire was overwhelming. I only saw that madman laughing maniacally in the fire, and you in the car just disappeared in the fire. Hijichu turned his head to prevent Gu Nianji from seeing his expression. When he saw that scene, he screamed, Nianji, and fainted. After I woke up, I was depressed for 3 years. Later, our people finally found the magnetic field resonator left behind by that person and learned of the existence of parallel spaces. Some people speculated that before that person died, he must have sent you into the parallel universe on the other side. And that person set himself on fire to hide the evidence of magnetic resonance so that we wouldn't find out where you went. Hijichu lowered his eyes. That's why I went to look for you. Even though he knew that if there was a corresponding body, he would die with him, he didn't care and insisted on going. He Qingjian was also afraid of him. Those 3 years of depression left He Qingjian with lingering fear. In the end, he couldn't argue with him, so he finally let go and let him try. Fortunately, little Hijichu had passed away a long time ago, and he had safely arrived at the parallel universe. When Shuyi, who had been by Hijichu's side during the 3 years Gu Nianji was away, had also volunteered to go with him. He Qingjian's impression of Wen Shuyi improved because of this. Gu Nianji listened to Hijichu talk about these things. Although he didn't sound emotional, she still felt very uncomfortable. She sneered and leaned against the sofa. She supported her head with one hand and said, Wen Shuyi also has deep feelings for you. Now that you don't have a fiancé, why don't you consider her? Hijichu pursed his lips and stood up to get a bottle of water from the fridge. He placed it in front of Gu Nianji and said, I've never had feelings for her. Hijichu still trusted her a lot because she had volunteered to go to the parallel world with him at the risk of her life. She was also very smart, attentive and good at taking care of people. Hijichu respected all those who worked hard to climb up the ladder. As long as they didn't do anything crooked, this kind of spirit was worthy of respect. Unfortunately, later he realized that she was a bit of a hypocrite and had an inexplicable hostility towards Gu Nianji. She had crossed his bottom line again and again, so he had chased her back. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and thought to herself, I'm just saying it casually. If you really dare to make Wen Shuyi your fiancé, I'll completely break up with you. She took the laptop from Hijichu's hand and replayed the video on the laptop. This time, it was no longer a virtual portrait projection video, but a video played on the computer. Because she was different from Hijichu. Hijichu had thought that her disappearance was Gu Xiangwen's doing from the beginning to the end. However, Lu Jin had personally told Gu Nianji that there was someone else. It was actually Qin Yaoguang who wanted to abduct her on her birthday. He had only used the situation to intercept Qin Yaoguang's plan. Before those people could hand her over to Qin Yaoguang, she had been taken away by Gu Xiangwen. In other words, the person who had taken Gu Nianji out of the He family was not Gu Xiangwen at all. However, the video just now did not show how she had been taken out of the He family's mansion. Could 7 seconds really make a person disappear completely? Then, in the next 10 minutes, she passed through the He family's heavily guarded courtyard and directly appeared in the car at the corner of the street? Gunyanji had a hunch that there was something wrong with this video. This was today's third update, Chapter 1574, The Miracle of 7 Seconds. A reminder for everyone's monthly and recommendation votes. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1586. Gunyanji patiently watched from the beginning. She had only caught a glimpse of it just now, so she hadn't noticed many details. Gunyanji chatted with Hijichu as she watched the video on her laptop. Young Master what did you think of this matter back then? Hijichu sat leisurely on the sofa next to her. He leaned over and picked up a mango from the coffee table in front of him. He cut it open with a knife and drew a cross on the flesh as he said, "Aren't you angry if I tell you?" "Why should I be angry?" Gunyanji tilted her head to look at him and smiled. "As long as it's the truth, I won't be angry." "Okay." Hijichu nodded. His hand holding the fruit knife paused for a moment, as if he was thinking about where to start. His eyebrows were very black and neat, and his eyelashes were long and thick. From the side, his pair of shimmering almond-shaped eyes made him look flirtatious. After a while he slowly said, "On the surface there's only one person in the entire country, or rather the entire world, who can make you disappear from a heavily guarded hall full of guests in 7 seconds. That person is your father, Gu Xiangwen." Gunyanji instinctively wanted to nod, but she quickly realized that she shouldn't. She smiled embarrassedly and said, "Really? So you're just making guesses without evidence? Am I the kind of person who would convict people based on guesses?" Hijichu glanced at her and placed the sliced mango on a small bone china plate before placing it in front of her. If you still remember the contents of the video, you'll know that Gu Xiangwen's note will arrive very soon. And only Gu Xiangwen is good at that kind of superb hypnosis. Gunyanji lowered her head silently and used a small fork to eat the mango Hijichu had peeled for her. Hijichu patted her head and continued, "Then after we chased after them, we did see a car drive away. I heard from passers-by that a man did get into the car with a little girl. But even so, disappearing in 7 seconds, leaving the He family's mansion in 10 minutes, and getting into the car at the intersection. How did they do it?" Gunyanji swallowed a mouthful of the fragrant and sweet mango. Her taste buds were soothed and she narrowed her eyes slightly. She was as obedient as a cute little Scottish fold cat. Hijichu scoffed and said, "We didn't understand this at the time, but from the results of our investigation, the only thing that could make you suddenly disappear was probably the magnetic resonance instrument. We found the magnetic resonance device at the place where Gu Xiangwen was hiding. At the time, we saw him laughing maniacally in the fire with our own eyes. There was a car in the fire and you were in the car." Hijichu's eyes dimmed. "I saw you and that car being engulfed in flames with my own eyes. Do you understand how I felt at the time?" Gunyanji, she pursed her lips and brought the bone porcelain plate with mangoes to Hijichu. She blinked her big bright eyes and said, "For you to eat? Would that make you feel better?" Hijichu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He rubbed her head. "I don't eat such sweet things. You eat them yourself." Gunyanji smiled and put down the bone porcelain plate. She smiled and said, "You make a lot of sense, but there are a few loopholes. First of all, the magnetic resonance device is a channel that connects 2 parallel universes. It can't be used to teleport in the same space-time. If I had immediately gone to the other world from the He family's birthday party, it would have made sense to use the magnetic resonance device to explain it. But according to your description, I went to the other world more than a month after the birthday party." Gunyanji took a tissue and wiped the juice off her hands. She was deep in thought. "So the option of using the magnetic resonance device to leave the He family can be ruled out." Hijichu frowned. "The magnetic resonance device can't be used to teleport in the same spacetime? Who told you that?" Gunyanji's big eyes darted around. Of course, she didn't say that Lu Jin had told her. She had been recuperating with Lu Jin for more than a month. When she was bored, Lu Jin would teach her about high-energy physics. And the book Quantum for Babies. He also enthusiastically used it as a bedtime story and read a few pages to her every day. Gunyanji had been recuperating for more than a month, and her knowledge of high-energy physics had improved by leaps and bounds. Although she still didn't understand it, she could still memorize it. It's very simple. Think about it. The principle of the magnetic resonance device is to find the same magnetic field frequency between 2 magnetic fields. When it reaches the same frequency, it uses the magnetic field resonance to form a spatial channel. And in the same spacetime, who does it resonate with? Gu Nianji told him Lu Jin's theory guiltily. Yijichu was also puzzled. Then if it wasn't a magnetic resonance device, how could you disappear from my side in 7 seconds, appear at the door and then follow someone into the car? He lowered his eyes and said lightly, even if it wasn't a magnetic resonance device, only Gu Xiangwen could do such a difficult operation. Gu Nianji shrunk her neck. She thought that if she hadn't found out about the twists and turns from Lu Jin, her first reaction would have been the same as Yijichu and the others. Only Lu Jin, who was also Gu Xiangwen, could do such a difficult thing. His image as a scientific genius was too deeply ingrained in people's hearts. He was always the first suspect when something unexplainable happened. What's more, this matter involved his most beloved daughter. It was a perfectly normal reasoning. From this perspective, it was the right choice for her father to fake his death and hide his identity. Gu Xiangwen had been burned to death, in broad daylight and in front of everyone's eyes. If anything happened in the future, he couldn't take the blame for it anymore, right? Moreover, Gu Xiangwen had indeed interfered in this matter, so even he probably felt that it wasn't unjust to put the blame on him, so he had no intention of explaining at all. Gu Xiangwen also had a social disorder. It would probably be more difficult for him to explain his actions to others than to kill him. Therefore he had never told anyone about the twists and turns. If Gu Nianji hadn't been his daughter, he definitely wouldn't have said a word. By a freak combination of factors, the culprit behind Gu Nianji's disappearance became Gu Xiangwen. Everyone thought so, and the results later confirmed everyone's guess. How should they put it? This wasn't wrong, but it wasn't completely right either. What Gu Nianji wanted to do was to arrest everyone related to her disappearance and make them bear the legal responsibility they deserved. Gu Xiangwen was her father. Although he had done something wrong, he had already used his actions to atone for his sins. She had long forgiven him. However, the others were still at large, thinking that no one knew what they had done. Anyone who harmed Gu Nianji wanted to get away with it? That was impossible. Gu Nianji calmed down and calmly watched the virtual holographic projection again. This time, she used her camera-like memory to memorize the faces of all the guests. She also counted the number of people present. There were a total of 237 people in the living room. 185 of them were children about her age. They were all dressed in cartoon costumes, including the invited guests and the children who were waiters. There were 52 adults, including the He family's servants. Because most of the waiters were children, there weren't many adult servants. There were only 7 or 8 of them who were responsible for maintaining order in the living room. The video played slowly and finally, it was time to turn off the lights and blow out the candles. After the lights came on, Gu Nianji decisively pressed the pause button. Her gaze scanned the computer screen inch by inch. When her gaze swept across the still image twice, Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. She realized something was wrong. She narrowed her eyes and looked up at Yijichu. "Young Master He, do you still have the list of everyone present at my birthday party 8 years ago? I mean everyone present, including your family's servants." Yijichu glanced at her. "Of course I do. I've read it more than once. What's wrong? Do you think there's a problem with any of them? But I investigated every single one of them after that, including the servants in the living room. I didn't find anything wrong." Gu Nianji thought to herself that her genius father had probably already succeeded in intercepting her. Of course, Yijichu wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with these people. She was a lawyer and knew that she couldn't simply suspect people without evidence. Yijichu was also a lawyer, so he naturally understood this very well. But if he couldn't find anything after that, what about before that? Gu Nianji felt that this was the blind spot of the whole matter. Gu Nianji smiled slightly. "I want to watch it again." After all, they were all witnesses at the scene. Yijichu wouldn't refuse such a request. He immediately pulled out the information from the computer's backup and sent it to Gu Nianji's email. "Watch it yourself when you have time." Gu Nianji opened the email and saw that the hundreds of pages of information were already lying in the email. She nodded and said to Yijichu, "There's something wrong with this video." Yijichu was surprised. "What's wrong with it? Everyone has investigated it." "I know you've investigated it." Gu Nianji quickly nodded. "But look here." Gu Nianji's mouse pointed to a spot on the screen. "In the direction diagonally behind you, there's a child wearing a cloak and a mask. From where Yijichu was standing at the time, this direction happened to be the blind spot of his vision. Just like when driving, there was also a fixed blind spot in the driver's vision." Yijichu's frown deepened. "Wasn't this child here a long time ago?" "No." Gu Nianji shook her head and quickly rewound the video. I counted. Before the lights went out, there were 237 people. After the lights went out, there were still 237 people. Do you understand the problem now? Hijichu froze and his face quickly drained of color. You mean you didn't leave the hall at all? Yes. Gunyenji closed her eyes. As for the exact number of children before the lights went out, there were a total of 186 children including me. Among them, there were 185 children wearing cartoon uniforms. I was the only one who didn't wear a cartoon uniform. After the lights went out, when the lights came back on, I was gone, but the number of children wearing cartoon uniforms had increased to 186. You can count them again. Hijichu stared blankly at the child wearing a cloak and a mask diagonally behind him in the video. He gritted his teeth and slammed his fist on the small coffee table. This is outrageous. He suddenly understood that the inside story of Gunyenji's disappearance 8 years ago was far more than what they had discovered. You mean, when you disappeared 8 years ago, other than Gu Xiangwen, someone else had a hand in it? Hijichu suddenly stood up. He couldn't wait to make a move. Gunyenji placed the mouse on the two adults next to the child and said calmly, "And these two people, do you know who they are? From their attire, they should be servants of the He family." Chapter 1587. Hijichu had heard his subordinates report that when Shuyi's mother had sent flowers to Gunyenji's room, but Gunyenji had rejected her. Then she had ordered someone to gag her and lock her up. Hijichu hadn't taken it to heart at the time. Anyway, if Gunyenji was unhappy, then so be it. He had almost forgotten that there was someone locked up in the storage room on the second floor. But now that he thought about it, something didn't seem right. Then she didn't ask to enter your room just now to exchange flowers for your room, did she? Hijichu's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Of course not. I already said that no one can go in, but she still wanted to go in. Even a fool would know that she had ulterior motives. Gunyenji smiled and raised her fist. That's why I threw my iron fist at her. Hijichu frowned. He still remembered that when he first brought Gunyenji back, he had deliberately pushed Gunyenji in a wheelchair to give those people a chance to spread the news. If he remembered correctly, the person who had sent the photo of Gunyenji in a wheelchair to Qin Yaoguang and the others should have been Wen Shuyi's father. Her parents were both gardeners for the He family and had worked for the He family for decades. All these years they had been well-behaved and honest. Other than giving birth to a particularly smart daughter, they had never had much of a presence among the He family's servants. But this seemingly honest gardener couple was actually the main suspect in stealing Gunyenji 8 years ago. Hijichu clenched his fists so hard that the joints of his fingers cracked. I think they're tired of living. Gunyenji quickly tugged at his sleeve and said anxiously, "Young Master He, what do you want to do?" Hijichu pulled out his pistol and said coldly, "Of course I'm going to torture them and then shoot them." Don't be so simple and crude. Gunyenji blinked. You'll give yourself away if you do this. What if they accuse you instead? Hijichu sneered. Who would dare to do that in my territory? His domineering aura blinded Gunyenji's eyes. She clutched her chest, and her other hand was still tugging at Hijichu's sleeve. She pursed her lips and smiled. Young Master He, calm down. When you were on our side, you were wise and resourceful. Why do you only know how to fight and kill when you're back? Hijichu grabbed her hand and said with a cold expression, in the face of absolute power, there's no need to play any tricks. All he needed to do was crush them with force. Gunyenji looked at Hijichu and sighed. She thought to herself that if she had grown up with Hijichu here, she would probably think that what he was doing was normal. However, she had grown up with Hua Xiaoheng in the other world. Although Hua Xiaoheng was also a person with absolute power and a privileged position in the other world, he never took this privilege for granted, nor did he put himself above the law and order. He was a protector of order, not an overseer of it. Under his tutelage, Gunyenji also abided by the rules of the game. She stood up from the sofa and said with a faint smile, Young Master He, leave this matter to me, okay? They kidnapped me back then and now I'm back to sue these human traffickers. Hijichu was stunned. You want to sue them? You want to make a big deal out of this? Of course I want to make a big deal out of it. Gunyenji raised her eyebrows slightly, and her big bright eyes flashed with the light of watching a show. Otherwise, how can we live up to their scheming? Against such people, if you killed them quietly, it would be too easy for them. And it'll leave you and your father with trouble in the future. Hijichu also knew that if they executed the gardener couple in private, it would indeed bring him and his father some trouble. But in his opinion this trouble was worth it. He said nonchalantly, "I'll give them a chance to be tried, but it'll be a secret trial. I'll let them die knowing why." "Young master, do you think they're the masterminds behind this?" Gu Nianji disagreed. "I still need them to dig out the people behind them. I said that I'll try them first. I'll dig out everything they know before executing them. Don't worry, none of the masterminds behind this will escape." He Jichu still wanted to resolve this matter in private. Firstly, the He family had such a traitor. If they didn't deal with him ruthlessly, others would question the He family's ability to execute. Secondly, it was to intimidate the other servants of the He family. If they had second thoughts, this would be their fate. Gu Nianji was silent for a long time. She sat back in her wheelchair and said angrily, "Fine, do whatever you want. Send me back. I can't stay here anymore." He Jichu saw that she was angry, so he quickly walked over and pulled her up from the wheelchair. He immediately compromised and said, "Look at your temper. I can only go along with you. Alright, do whatever you want. I won't get involved." "Really?" Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. "But I still need a few favors from you." Fine. Do whatever you want. These two are going to be arrested anyway." Ijichu took out his phone and began to give orders. Gu Nianji quickly said, "Keep an eye on them in secret first. Don't let them escape. I'll draft the legal documents now. I'll go to your police department tomorrow morning to report them and ask for their arrest." 8 years ago, Gu Nianji was only 12 years old and a minor. Kidnapping a minor was a felony in the Wuxia Empire, and it was the same crime as buying and selling. Therefore, there were very few kidnappings here, which had a lot to do with the strict legislation in this area. He Jichu had no choice but to say, "I'll go with you tomorrow. I'll prepare the evidence." Gu Nianji pointed at the video surveillance. "These are all circumstantial evidence. I'm both the victim and the most direct witness. I can completely prove that they committed a crime and bring them to justice." Although she couldn't remember what had happened at that time, the video recording gave her a chance to reconstruct her memory. He Jichu went to prepare the evidence, but Gu Nianji was thinking about why she didn't cry or scream. After He Jichu left, Gu Nianji quickly contacted Lu Jin again. "Dad, do you know how Qin Yaoguang stole me from the He family 8 years ago?" Gu Nianji whispered to Lu Jin for help. Lu Jin thought about it for a moment and said, "When I chased after them, they had already brought you out and were about to arrange for you to get on the plane. I took you away from the airport." In other words, the man and child who had been seen by passers-by getting into the car at the intersection in front of the He family's house that night were all fake substitutes. At that time, Gu Nianji was actually still in the He family's living room and hadn't left. Gu Nianji smiled and said, "Then the other party is really scheming. Even if you didn't intercept and take me away, they would still have blamed this on you. Fortunately, you didn't bear this undeserved reputation for nothing." Lu Jin, or Gu Xiangwen's appearance, had instead confirmed the other party's series of framing. This was probably the reason why the He family hadn't found anyone else interfering in the investigation. Because Gu Xiangwen had really appeared and taken Gu Nianji away. Who would have the time to go back and watch the surveillance footage again? This time, Gu Nianji looked at the surveillance footage again and again. It was actually because she had cheated, and Lu Jin had personally helped her cheat. Gu Nianji talked about the clues she had found in the surveillance footage and said in puzzlement, "But I didn't cry or scream. I just stood in the middle of the gardener couple like a fool. I was too obedient. This isn't scientific. It's completely impossible." Lu Jin said without hesitation, "Then they must have gotten the triazolam, which I had modified in Gu Qin's biological laboratory, from Qin Yaoguang. It's also called triazolam. Triazolam is a benzodiazepine-type hypnotic drug. After my modification, the time it takes to take effect has been reduced from 15 minutes to 0.1 seconds. It was originally a light blue pill, but it can also be dissolved in water and covered in the mouth and nose. As long as you come into contact with it for 0.1 seconds, it can produce a sedative and hypnotic effect. It can also cause a short period of memory loss." Gu Nianji's expression was very ugly. She immediately said, "Then it looks like they covered my face with this thing within 7 seconds of turning off the lights." However, this couple's hands and feet were really fast. She didn't know how long they had been practicing. One person covered her mouth and nose and draped a cloak over her body. One of them took off her pink diamond crown and put a mask over her face. Then he quickly pulled her to stand diagonally behind He Jichu. She was only 2 steps away from him. Ijichu didn't sleep that night. He had been watching the video. She had been so close to him when his heart had been torn apart and his life had been worse than death. This made him even more sorrowful and bitter. This was really the best portrayal of being so close, yet worlds apart. He thought that the furthest distance between her and him wasn't that he loved her and she couldn't respond, but that she was standing behind him and he had lost her. This was today's second update, Chapter 1576, So Close, Yet Worlds Apart. Remind everyone of your monthly votes and recommendation votes. Good night, all the big shots and little angels, that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.